They say you learn who your real family is in moments of humiliation. I learned it while drowning in a pool, fully dressed, makeup, running everyone laughing. My nephew shoved me in at my sister's birthday party. My $2,000 Hermes dress clung to me like shame. My mascara traced rivers down my cheeks, and not a single person moved to help me. My sister stood at the edge, arms crossed, smirking. "Go ahead," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hit him back if you dare." 35 years. 35 years of being the invisible daughter, the forgotten sister, the one they only called when they needed something. I'd built an empire in the shadows while they celebrated my sister's every mediocre achievement. I climbed out of that pool alone. Water pooled at my feet. I looked at every single face and said 5 words, "Remember this moment." Then I made a phone call. 20 minutes later, a man in a Tom Ford suit walked through their backyard gate. My husband, the billionaire tech founder my sister rejected a decade ago, and I watched their world begin to crumble. Stay with me. Because what happened next? They never saw it coming. My name is Michelle Howard. I'm 35 years old, and I design interiors for people who can afford to dream in marble and silk. On paper, my life looks exactly like success. But success, I've learned, doesn't erase the shape of childhood wounds. It just teaches you how to carry them with better posture. I spent my entire life being the shadow in family photographs. Not because I was shy or unremarkable, but because when you stand next to the sun, people stop looking for other sources of light. Vanessa was that sun. My older sister, 3 years ahead of me, always 3 steps ahead in our parents' affection. I remember being 7 years old, watching Mum take Vanessa shopping for back-to-school clothes. They came home with bags and bags, new jeans, fresh sneakers, backpacks with the characters Vanessa loved. I got Vanessa's old clothes hemmed and altered to fit my smaller frame. "You don't mind, do you, sweetheart?" Mum would say, already walking away before I could answer. "You're so easygoing. Not demanding, like your sister." Easygoing, that was the word they used. What they meant was forgettable. When Vanessa made the junior varsity cheerleading squad, Dad took off work early to watch her first game. They had a celebration dinner afterward at her favourite restaurant. When I won the regional art competition that same year, the youngest student ever selected, Dad said, "That's wonderful, honey," and went back to reading his newspaper. There was no dinner, no photos, just a quiet expectation that I'd continue excelling without requiring acknowledgement. I learnt the pattern early. Vanessa's B+ in history warranted praise and encouragement. My straight A's were met with, "Well, you've always been smart. That's just who you are." As if achievement that came naturally was somehow worth less. As if I didn't stay up late studying while Vanessa watched television. As if my effort was invisible simply because I didn't make it loud. By the time I reached high school, I'd stopped trying to compete for their attention. I poured myself into my art instead, sketching floor plans and dreaming of spaces where every corner had purpose, where nothing was overlooked. I got into a prestigious design program on a full scholarship. My parents came to Vanessa's college graduation state school, barely passing grades, and threw her a massive party. When I graduated summa cum laude 2 years later, they sent a card. The worst part wasn't the favoritism. I could have survived being second best. The worst part was the way they made me feel grateful for scraps. "You're so independent," they'd say. "You don't need us the way Vanessa does." As if needing less meant deserving less. As if being strong meant I didn't bleed when they forgot my birthday, or missed my gallery showing, or asked me to skip Thanksgiving because Vanessa's going through something and needs support. I built my design firm from nothing. No family investment, no connections, just me and a laptop in a studio apartment with walls so thin I could hear my neighbours' every argument. I worked 18-hour days, survived on coffee and ambition, and slowly built a reputation for transforming spaces into stories. My work has been featured in Architectural Digest. I've designed homes for celebrities whose names you'd recognise. I've earned every single thing I have, and I've never told my family any of it, not because I'm ashamed, but because I learnt somewhere between my 7th birthday and my 27th that sharing your victories with people who've never celebrated you doesn't bring you closer. It just gives them new reasons to diminish you. So I stopped sharing, I stopped asking, I stopped hoping. I never asked for anything because I learned that asking only confirms you're not worth giving to. That philosophy had served me well for years. I kept my distance, showed up for the obligatory Christmas dinner, sent birthday cards with generic messages, and lived my life entirely separate from theirs. It was peaceful. Lonely sometimes, but peaceful. Then, my mother called 3 weeks ago. I saw her name on my phone screen and considered letting it go to voicemail. I almost always did. But something made me answer that Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing fabric samples for a client's penthouse renovation. Michelle. Her voice had that particular tone I recognised from childhood, the one that meant she wanted something. We need to talk about Vanessa's birthday party. I switched the phone to speaker and continued examining a silk damask sample. What about it? You're coming, of course. It wasn't a question. It never was with her. I hadn't planned on it, I said carefully. I have a project deadline that weekend. The sigh that came through the phone could have extinguished candles. Michelle family is everything. You need to make an effort to fit in. Vanessa specifically asked if you'd be there. I doubted that sincerely. Vanessa and I hadn't had a real conversation in years. We exchanged pleasantries at holidays, carefully avoided any topic deeper than weather or traffic, and went back to our separate lives. She didn't ask about my work, I didn't ask about hers. It was an unspoken agreement that worked for both of us. Mum, I really don't think... She's your only sister, she's turning 38. It's important. A pause, then the familiar guilt deployment. Your father and I aren't getting any younger. We'd like to see our family together while we still can. I closed my eyes. There it was. The weapon they'd wielded my entire life, making every boundary I tried to set feel like a personal attack on their mortality. Fine, I heard myself say. I'll be there. I regretted it the moment I hung up. The last time I tried to share my personal life with them was 8 years ago. I'd been dating Daniel for a year and things were serious. We were talking about marriage, about building a life together. Against my better judgment, I thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd finally see me as a whole person, with a full life worthy of their interest. I brought Daniel to Sunday dinner. He was kind, successful, genuine. He asked my parents thoughtful questions and complimented my mother's cooking. He treated me with obvious affection and respect. My mother barely looked at him. My father shook his hand with the enthusiasm of someone touching a damp washcloth. Vanessa smirked into her wineglass. After dinner, while Daniel was in the bathroom, Vanessa leaned over and whispered, "Someone like him wouldn't seriously be with you. What did you promise him?" My mother added, "Don't get your hopes up, sweetheart. Men like that have options." I never brought him back. We got married 6 months later at a courthouse with 2 friends as witnesses. I didn't tell my family until months afterward, and even then only because my mother asked directly if I was still seeing that man. I said we'd gotten married. She said, "Oh," and changed the subject to Vanessa's new living room furniture. That was the moment I stopped trying. But here I was 8 years later, getting ready to try again. Some part of me that refused to die still hoped that maybe possibly this time could be different. Maybe enough years had passed. Maybe they'd grown. Maybe I had finally achieved enough success that they couldn't ignore me anymore. I spent an hour selecting my outfit. I wanted them to see that I'd made it, that the daughter they'd overlooked had built something remarkable. I chose a Hermes dress I'd bought after landing my biggest client last year, deep emerald green, elegant, expensive, in a way that whispered rather than shouted. I paired it with simple jewellery and shoes that cost more than my first month's rent had been. Looking in the mirror, I saw a successful woman, polished, confident, worthy. I grabbed my keys and headed to my car, rehearsing pleasant conversation topics. I'd ask about Mom's garden, compliment whatever new thing Vanessa had bought, keep things light and superficial, get through the afternoon without incident. Maybe they'd notice the dress ask about work show, even a flicker of genuine interest. The drive to Vanessa's house took 40 minutes through suburban sprawl. She and her husband had bought a mini mansion 3 years ago, all new construction with a 3-car garage and a pool. Every time I visited, she made sure to give a tour, pointing out every expensive detail, as if I hadn't spent my entire career understanding exactly how much things cost and what they signified. I parked on the street, not wanting to block the circular driveway where other guests' cars were already arranged. Through the side gate, I could hear music and laughter. A lot of people. Vanessa always did love an audience. I checked my reflection one more time in the rearview mirror. The dress fit perfectly. My makeup was flawless. I looked like someone who had her life together because I did. I wanted them to see me, not knowing they were already blind. The moment I stepped through the gate into Vanessa's backyard, I felt the temperature drop despite the warm afternoon sun. Not literally, of course, but there's a particular chill that comes from walking into a room where you're tolerated rather than welcomed. The party was exactly what I'd expected. White tent with elegant draping, catered food arranged on tables that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, a bartender mixing craft cocktails, string lights waiting to twinkle when evening came. Everything looked perfect in that Instagram-ready way that suggested more money than taste. My cousin Jennifer spotted me first. She was holding a glass of rosé and talking to 2 women I didn't recognise. Her eyes travelled from my face down to my shoes and back up again, the kind of assessment women do when they're calculating your net worth. "Michelle, you made it." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Still doing the interior design thing. The interior design thing. As if my career was a hobby I'd picked up at a craft fair. "Yes, business is good," I said simply. "That's so great. Freelance work must be so flexible." The way she said flexible made it sound like code for unemployed. "No husband yet to tie you down." I felt my jaw tighten. Actually, But Jennifer had already turned back to her companions. "This is Michelle, Vanessa's little sister. She's very independent, does her own thing." Her own thing. Another phrase that sounded complimentary but meant strange other, not like us. I excused myself and made my way toward the gift table, carrying the carefully wrapped package I'd brought for Tyler. I'd spent more time than I wanted to admit, selecting it a high-end gaming headset I'd researched thoroughly, because I actually paid attention to the few details Vanessa mentioned about her son. It was expensive, thoughtful, and completely inappropriate given that Tyler had never once acknowledged my existence beyond obligatory holiday greetings. "Michelle, darling." My mother appeared air-kissing near my cheek without actually making contact. She was wearing a lavender dress that probably cost a quarter of what mine did, but somehow made me feel overdressed. "You look, well, that's quite a dress." "Quite a dress. Not beautiful, not elegant, quite." "Thanks, Mum. Happy birthday to Vanessa. She'll be so pleased you came." My mother's eyes were already scanning the crowd, looking for someone more important to talk to. "You remember your Aunt Carol, don't you?" An elderly woman I vaguely recognised from childhood holidays was making her way toward us, moving slowly with a cane. She must have been in her 80s now, my mother's aunt, which made her my great-aunt. Her eyes locked onto my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Linda," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Linda, is that you?" My mother's entire body went rigid. "Aunt Carol, this is Michelle. My daughter. You remember Michelle." But Aunt Carol kept staring at me, reaching out to touch my cheek with fingers that felt like dry paper. "You look so much like Linda. The eyes especially, just like my Linda." Linda. my mother's older sister who died when I was a baby. I'd seen exactly one photograph of her in my entire life tucked in the back of an old album. My mother had closed the book immediately when I'd asked about her. "Michelle doesn't look anything like Linda," my mother said sharply, taking my arm and steering me away with more force than necessary. "Aunt Carol gets confused. Don't pay attention to her ramblings." But I'd seen something in my mother's face during that brief exchange, something between pain and panic. She walked me to the bar and ordered herself a gin and tonic with shaking hands, then disappeared into the crowd without another word to me. I found Vanessa holding court near the pool, surrounded by a cluster of women who laughed too loudly at everything she said. She was wearing a white dress that probably cost twice what mine did, her blonde hair professionally styled in beach waves that looked effortless, but definitely weren't. "Michelle?" "Shy." She accepted the gift I handed her with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Oh, you didn't have to do this." The way she said it made it clear she thought I couldn't afford to. She set the package aside without opening it, without even asking what it was for Tyler. "Your dress is lovely," she said in the tone people use when they mean the opposite. Very bold colour choice. One of her friends, I didn't know her name, jumped in. "Vanessa, you have to tell us more about your business. Everyone's talking about how fast your company is growing." Vanessa's smile became genuine. This was her favourite topic. "We've been very fortunate. I've built an incredible team." "I heard you have some kind of secret weapon," another woman said, leaning in conspiratorially. "Someone mentioned a consultant who's supposed to be absolutely brilliant." Something flickered across Vanessa's face, too quick to read. "Oh well, I have an excellent advisory team. It takes a village, you know." "No, I mean that specific person," the woman persisted. "What do they call her? The ghost. Someone who fixes impossible deals but never takes public credit." I felt my stomach tighten. That was a nickname some people in the industry had given me. I'd worked very hard to keep my consulting work anonymous. "I wouldn't know anything about that," Vanessa said quickly, her voice just a touch too sharp. "Anyway, let's talk about something more interesting than business. This is a party." She expertly redirected the conversation, but not before I caught the look she shot in my direction. It was quick assessing and carried a warning I couldn't quite decipher. I was turning to leave, to maybe find a quiet corner where I could count down the minutes until I could politely escape when I felt hands on my back. Then came Tyler with a grin I'll never forget. I didn't even have time to turn around. Tyler's hands connected with my back, both palms flat between my shoulder blades and shoved hard. Not a playful tap, not an accident. A deliberate, forceful push that sent me stumbling forward with no chance to catch my balance. The world tilted. My arms windmilled uselessly. I heard my own gasp, sharp and startled, and then I was falling. The water hit me like a slap, cold despite the warm day shocking every nerve ending at once. I went under, completely, the emerald silk of my dress billowing around me like a jellyfish. For a disorienting moment, I didn't know which way was up. The chlorine stung my eyes. Water rushed into my nose. My expensive shoes felt like anchors dragging me down. I broke the surface, gasping instinctively, reaching for the pool's edge. My hair was plastered to my face, heavy and dripping. My carefully applied makeup. The mascara, the eyeliner, the lipstick I'd chosen to make myself look polished and professional was already running in dark rivulets down my cheeks. I could taste it chemical and bitter. And then I heard the laughter. It started with a few chuckles, then built like a wave. Loud, raucous, the kind of laughter that feeds on itself and grows. I blinked water from my eyes and saw them. All of them. Every single person at that party had turned to look. Aunts, uncles, cousins, Vanessa's friends, people I'd never met. They were pointing, they were laughing. Several had their phones out, recording, capturing my humiliation for posterity and social media. "Oh my God, did you see that?" someone shrieked, delighted. "Tyler, you little devil!" That was my Uncle Ron, laughing so hard he was bent over. I grabbed the pool's edge, my dress weighing me down. The silk that had cost me $1,500 was now clinging to my body, like seaweed transparent, in places ruined completely. I tried to pull myself up, but the dress was too heavy, too waterlogged. My arms shook with the effort. No one moved to help me. I looked up at the crowd surrounding the pool. Tyler was standing exactly where he'd pushed me, from that grin still plastered across his 16-year-old face. He looked proud, triumphant, like he had just won a prize. "It was just a joke, Aunt Michelle," he called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't be so serious." More laughter. Someone, I think it was Cousin Jennifer, shouted, "Lighten up, Michelle. It's a party." I finally managed to heave myself up onto the pool deck, moving like something ancient and wounded. Water poured off me in streams, pooling at my feet. My hair hung in thick, wet ropes. My dress made obscene squelching sounds with every movement. I could feel my mascara tracking down my face in black tears. The laughter was starting to die down now, people returning to their conversations, the spectacle over, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't just been pushed into a pool fully clothed, as if this was just another amusing moment at Vanessa's birthday party, a funny story they'd tell later. "Kids being kids," I heard someone mutter. "Boys will be boys." I stood there dripping, looking around at faces I'd known my entire life. Not one person asked if I was okay. Not one person offered me a towel or a hand or even a sympathetic look. They'd pulled out their phones to document my humiliation. But now that the show was over, I was invisible again. Vanessa was still near the appetizer table, a glass of champagne in her hand. She was smiling, shaking her head with amused exasperation, like Tyler had spilled a drink, not deliberately assaulted her sister. She caught my eye and shrugged, mouthing "boys," as if that explained everything, as if that excused everything. My mother was standing near the tent, talking to someone I didn't recognize. She looked over at me, and for one brief second, I thought I hoped I'd see concern on her face. Maybe even anger on my behalf. Instead, she shook her head. A small movement, disapproving, disappointed. Not at Tyler for pushing me, not at the crowd for laughing. At me, for making a scene, for being wet and bedraggled and embarrassing at her granddaughter's party, for not handling it with more grace. I felt something crack inside my chest. I'd spent 35 years trying to be good enough for these people, trying to be quiet enough, successful enough, independent enough, undemanding enough. I'd contorted myself into shapes I barely recognized, all for the hope that someday they'd look at me and see someone worth celebrating. But standing there in my ruined dress, water running into my shoes, makeup smeared like a nightmare, I finally understood something I should have known years ago. They would never see me, not because I wasn't enough, but because they'd decided long ago that I wasn't worth looking at. The party continued around me. Someone turned the music up. Laughter floated over from the bar. Tyler had already moved on, accepting congratulations from some of the younger guests, like he'd performed a magic trick. I stood there alone, dripping and shaking, not from cold, but from something deeper. Something that felt like rage mixed with grief, mixed with a strange, terrible clarity. But the water wasn't what drowned me. It was the silence when I needed help. I was still standing there, water pooling around my feet, when I heard footsteps approaching. I knew who it was before I even looked up. I could recognize Vanessa's gait, anywhere that confident stride of someone who'd never been pushed into a pool at their own party. She stopped a careful distance away, far enough that my dripping wouldn't damage her white dress. Her champagne glass caught the sunlight, sparkling and perfect, just like everything else about her presentation. She was smiling, not a warm smile. The kind of smile a cat gives a mouse. "Oh, Michelle," her voice carried just far enough for nearby guests to hear. "He was just playing around. You know how teenage boys are." I looked at her, really looked at her. My older sister, who'd gotten every advantage, every opportunity, every ounce of our parents' pride, who'd somehow convinced herself she'd earned it all. Who was now standing here defending her son for humiliating me at her birthday party? "Just playing around," I repeated, my voice flat. "Exactly." She took a sip of champagne, casual, unbothered. Don't make such a big deal out of it. Then she leaned in, slightly lowering her voice, just enough that only I could hear the edge in it. Go ahead. Hit him back if you dare. It was a challenge, a dare. She was baiting me, testing me, knowing exactly how I'd respond. Michelle, the quiet one. Michelle, the easygoing one. Michelle, who never made waves or caused problems or fought back. She was so certain I'd do nothing. Behind her, Tyler was watching with that same satisfied grin. A few of his friends had gathered around him now, probably congratulating him on his hilarious prank. He looked so pleased with himself, so confident that there would be no consequences. Why wouldn't he be? In his entire 16 years of life, he'd watched his mother get away with everything. He'd learned from the master. Michelle. My mother's voice cut through my thoughts. She'd made her way over her face tight with that particular expression I knew so well. Disapproval mixed with embarrassment, mixed with the urgent need to smooth everything over. Don't overreact. You're making a scene. Making a scene. I was the one making a scene. Not Tyler who'd assaulted me. Not the guests who'd filmed it. Not Vanessa who was openly mocking me. Me. For having the audacity to stand here dripping wet instead of laughing along with them. Just let it go, she continued, her voice dropping to a hiss. Don't embarrass the family. I felt several relatives nodding around me. Uncle Ron was giving me that look that said, come on, be a good sport. Cousin Jennifer had her phone half raised, probably hoping I'd do something worth recording. An aunt, whose name I couldn't remember, was shaking her head slightly, as if disappointed I was being so difficult. The family. I was embarrassing the family, not by being pushed into a pool, but by failing to immediately forgive and forget. I stood there and, for the first time in my life, I really saw them. All of them. I looked at each face, memorizing them. Uncle Ron with his red face and expensive watch. Jennifer with her highlighted hair and designer handbag she'd probably bought on credit. My mother with her lavender dress and her desperate need for everything to appear perfect. Vanessa with her champagne and her smirk. Tyler with his grin and his mother's protection. I saw them clearly. And I saw something else too. I saw that nothing I could say or do right now would change anything. If I yelled, I'd be hysterical. If I cried, I'd be oversensitive. If I argued, I'd be difficult. If I left, I'd be dramatic. And if I hit Tyler as Vanessa had just dared me to do, I'd be violent and unstable and everything they'd always suspected about the quiet daughter who never quite fit in. There was no winning move here. There never had been. Something inside me that had been bending for 35 years finally broke. Not with a snap, but with a quiet, definitive crack, like ice breaking on a frozen lake, like a bone that had been stressed too long, finally giving way. But instead of shattering, I felt myself becoming strangely solid, clear. The fog I'd been living in for decades lifted all at once. I didn't need to win this moment. I needed to remember it. Water dripped from my hair onto the decorative pavers Vanessa had probably spent thousands on. My dress clung to me, ruined beyond repair. My makeup was certainly a horror show. I could feel mascara trails on my cheeks like war paint. I took a breath, then another. Remember this moment, I said. My voice wasn't loud. I didn't shout or cry or plead. I just spoke, clearly, calmly stating a simple fact. Like I was pointing out that the sky was blue or that water was wet. Vanessa's smirk faltered slightly. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer her. I just looked at each of them one more time. My mother, my sister, my nephew, the relatives who'd laughed and filmed and done nothing. I wanted to burn this image into my memory. Every detail, the angle of the afternoon sun, the smell of chlorine and catered food, the sound of music still playing from speakers like nothing had happened, the feeling of expensive ruined silk against my skin, the taste of pool water and dissolving makeup. Remember this moment, not as a threat, not as revenge, but as the last time I would ever ask these people for anything. The last time I would hope they'd surprise me. The last time I would show up trying to earn love that was never going to be given freely. I turned and walked toward the house. My shoes squelched with every step. Water left a trail behind me like breadcrumbs. I held my head up even though I looked ridiculous, even though they were probably still staring, even though I could feel their judgment following me like a shadow. I walked through Vanessa's perfect house to find my purse, my keys, a bathroom where I could call the person who actually gave a damn about me. Behind me, the party continued. The music played, people laughed, life went on as if I'd never been there at all. They thought it was a threat. But it was a promise to myself. Vanessa's house was a monument to borrowed taste. Everything looked like it had been lifted from a magazine spread without understanding why any of it worked. The bathroom I found was all marble and gold fixtures, the kind of ostentatious luxury that screamed money but whispered insecurity. I locked the door behind me and finally looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was almost unrecognizable. My hair hung in dark, wet rope still dripping onto my shoulders. Black mascara had created tracks down both cheeks, like I'd been crying though I hadn't shed a single tear. My lipstick was smeared across my chin. The emerald dress that had made me feel powerful 3 hours ago now clung to me like something desperate and defeated. But my eyes were different. They weren't sad or hurt or pleading. They were clear, focused, like I'd been looking through fog my entire life and someone had finally opened a window. I pulled my phone from my waterproof clutch, thank God for small mercies, and stared at the screen for a long moment. My thumb hovered over Daniel's name. This was the call I'd been avoiding for 8 years. The call that would change everything. The call that would mean no going back to the careful distance I'd maintained between my real life and my family. For 8 years, I'd kept him separate, protected him from their dismissiveness, protected myself from their judgment, protected the fragile hope that maybe someday they'd respect me enough to be happy for me, but that hope had just drowned in Vanessa's pool. I pressed his name. He answered on the second ring. "Hey love, how's the party?" His voice was warm, familiar, everything that family gathering had not been. I could hear him moving around, probably working in his home office, like he did most Saturday afternoons. "It's time," I said. My voice was calm, steady, not angry or hurt or broken, just decided. "Come now." There was a pause. A long one. Daniel knew exactly what I meant. We'd had this conversation before, years ago, when I told him I wasn't ready for my family to know about our marriage. He'd respected it, even though he hadn't understood it. He'd never pushed, but he'd also made it clear that whenever I was ready, he'd be there. "You're sure?" he asked quietly. "I'm sure." "Address, and I gave it to him. He didn't ask what happened, didn't need the story. He just said 40 minutes. And I could hear him already moving, grabbing keys, preparing. "Daniel, yeah? Wear the Tom Ford suit." I heard the smile in his voice. "The grey or the navy?" "Navy." "Got it? I love you." "I love you too." I hung up and looked at myself in the mirror again. 40 minutes. Enough time to transform from the woman they'd pushed into a pool into someone they wouldn't recognise. I found spare towels in Vanessa's bathroom cabinet, monogrammed of course, and began the work of putting myself back together, but not the way I'd been before. That version of Michelle had walked into this party hoping to be seen. The version I was creating now didn't need their seeing anymore. I wrung out my hair as much as possible, then twisted it into a tight bun at the base of my neck. Severe, elegant, the kind of style that meant business. I scrubbed my face clean of the ruined makeup, taking my time watching the black streaks disappear down the sink. My skin felt raw and new underneath. I'd learned long ago to keep a complete change of clothes in my car, not because I expected to be pushed into pools, but because my work sometimes meant emergency client meetings or unexpected site visits. I wrapped myself in a towel and made my way back through Vanessa's house to the front door. A few guests had come inside and I could feel their eyes on me, their whispers, but I didn't care anymore. Let them stare. My car was still parked on the street where I'd left it. I grabbed the garment bag from my trunk and went back inside, back to that marble bathroom, back to the mirror that was showing me a different woman than the one who'd arrived. The dress I pulled from the bag was black. Simple, elegant, more expensive than the green one had been actually, but in a way that didn't announce itself. It was the kind of dress that successful women wore to important meetings. Power wrapped in silk and perfect tailoring. I put it on slowly, methodically, zipped it up, smoothed the fabric. It fit like it had been made for me because it had been. Custom tailored last year after a designer client had insisted I meet her private seamstress. My emergency makeup bag was comprehensive. I'd learned to be prepared for anything. I redid my face with the precision of someone painting a masterpiece. Foundation, concealer, a subtle smoky eye, perfectly lined lips in a shade that looked natural but wasn't. Mascara applied carefully, building volume without clumps. I had a pair of black heels in the car too. I put them on, checking the overall effect in Vanessa's full-length mirror. The woman looking back at me bore no resemblance to the one who'd climbed out of the pool 30 minutes ago. This woman looked expensive, composed, untouchable, like someone who'd never been pushed around in her life. But more than that, she looked done. Done apologizing for existing. Done shrinking herself to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold her. Done waiting for people to love her who'd proven time and again they were incapable of it. I checked my phone. Daniel had texted 20 minutes out. I allowed myself a small smile. My husband, my partner, the man who'd seen me clearly from the first day we met and never once asked me to be anything other than exactly who I was. The man my family had dismissed as not good enough for me without knowing he was a tech entrepreneur who'd co-founded a company worth hundreds of millions. The man I'd kept secret because I thought I was protecting him. But I wasn't protecting him. I was protecting them. From seeing exactly how wrong they'd been about me. From having to face their own prejudice and smallness. I was done with that too. I studied my reflection one final time. Checked my hair, my makeup, the line of my dress. Everything was perfect. Everything was armor. This wasn't the same woman who'd walked into this party hoping for scraps of approval. This was someone who'd finally remembered she was never the problem. I picked up my purse, squared my shoulders, and walked back out toward the party. I wasn't the same woman who walked in, and they were about to find out. I stepped back into Vanessa's backyard with the kind of calm that comes from having nothing left to lose. The party was still in full swing, the music still played. People still laughed and drank and ate overpriced appetizers, as if the last hour hadn't happened, as if I hadn't been humiliated and dismissed and pushed into a pool while they filmed it. Several heads turned when I emerged from the house. I watched confusion flicker across faces as they tried to reconcile the drowned woman from before with the composed one standing before them now. Cousin Jennifer actually did a double take her rosé glass, frozen halfway to her lips. I didn't explain, didn't apologize for disappearing, didn't acknowledge the stares or the whispers. I simply walked to the bar, ordered a sparkling water with lime, and positioned myself near the back gate where I had a clear view of the driveway. Michelle? My mother appeared at my elbow, her voice uncertain. I thought you'd left. Not yet, I said, taking a sip of my water. She looked at my dress and my completely redone appearance, trying to understand what had changed. That's a different dress. Yes. You look... She struggled for words. Professional. Not beautiful, not stunning. Professional. Even now, she couldn't quite manage a compliment. Thank you, I said, because I'd spent 35 years being polite to people who didn't deserve it, and old habits die hard. Vanessa was holding court near the pool again, the site of my humiliation, now just backdrop for her continued celebration. She caught sight of me and her eyebrows rose. For a moment, something that might have been concern crossed her face, probably worried I was going to make a scene after all. But then, she turned back to her audience, dismissing me once again. Tyler was lounging near the fire pit with some teenage friends, all of them on their phones, probably posting photos of me soaking wet, probably getting likes and laughing emojis and comments about how hilarious it was. I checked my phone. Daniel had texted, "Pulling up now." My heart rate didn't increase. My hands didn't shake. I just felt this profound sense of rightness, like I was finally doing what I should have done 8 years ago. The sound of a car engine cut through the party noise. It was distinctive, the low, powerful purr of a vehicle that cost more than most people's annual salary. Conversations began to falter as people turned toward the sound. A sleek, black Mercedes pulled up to the curb, the kind with elegant lines and a presence that announced its owner's success before they even stepped out. The engine cut off. The driver's door opened, and Daniel emerged. He'd done exactly as I asked. The navy Tom Ford suit fit him perfectly tailored to emphasize his broad shoulders and trim waist. The white shirt was crisp, the tie a subtle pattern that spoke of expensive taste without shouting it. His dark hair was styled just so, with a touch of silver at the temples, that made him look distinguished rather than old. He was 42, but he wore it well, the kind of man who'd grown more handsome with age, confidence radiating it from every movement. He stood for a moment beside the car, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found mine. When they did, his entire face softened into a smile that was just for me. The smile that said, "I see you. I know you. You're safe with me." The party had gone almost completely silent. Everyone was staring at this stranger who'd just arrived in a car that cost more than some of their houses. He walked through the gate with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent years walking into rooms full of important people. His posture was perfect. His stride was measured. He commanded attention without demanding it. He walked straight to me. Not to Vanessa, the birthday girl. Not to my parents, the hosts. To me. "Hey, beautiful," he said softly and kissed my cheek like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Because he had. I took his hand. His wedding ring caught the late afternoon sunlight, a simple platinum band he'd worn for 8 years. The same band that matched the one on my left hand that my family had somehow never noticed or asked about. I turned to face the crowd of relatives and strangers still holding Daniel's hand and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "Everyone, this is my husband, Daniel Howard." The silence that followed was profound. Absolute. Even the music seemed to fade into the background. I watched the shock ripple through the crowd like a stone thrown into still water. My mother's mouth literally fell open, her gin and tonic tilting dangerously in her hand. Uncle Ron stopped mid-chew a crab cake apparently forgotten on his tongue. Cousin Jennifer's eyes went so wide I could see the whites all around her irises, but it was Vanessa's reaction that interested me most. Her face went completely white, not pale, white, like every drop of blood had suddenly drained away. Her champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the decorative pavers, but she didn't even look down. She was staring at Daniel with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Recognition, horror, disbelief. Because Vanessa knew exactly who Daniel Howard was. She'd met him 12 years ago when our mother had set them up. She'd gone to coffee with him once, listened to him talk about his startup dreams and his passion for technology, and dismissed him as beneath her. "Just a tech engineer," she'd told our mother afterward. "I need someone with real money, not potential." She'd rejected him without a second thought. And now he was standing in her backyard in a suit that cost more than her monthly mortgage, holding hands with her little sister, introducing himself as my husband. I watched her try to process it. Watched her look from Daniel to me and back again. Watched her do the math in her head, counting back years, trying to figure out when this happened, how this happened, why she hadn't known. Around us, relatives were pulling out their phones. Not to take pictures this time, to Google. I could see them typing Daniel Howard into their search bars, could see their faces change as results loaded, could see the moment they realised exactly who was standing in front of them. Daniel squeezed my hand gently. He knew what this moment meant, knew what I'd protected him from for 8 years, knew what I was choosing by bringing him here now. My mother finally found her voice. Michelle, what? When did you? 10 years ago, I said simply. We've been married for 10 years. More silence, more staring, more frantic phone checking. Vanessa was still frozen, her face a mask of shock and something else. Something that looked a lot like regret. And I knew exactly why. Vanessa's champagne glass lay shattered at her feet, but she still hadn't moved. She was staring at Daniel like he was a ghost, or maybe like he was a winning lottery ticket she'd thrown away. Vanessa, one of her friends, touched her arm. Are you okay? You look like you've seen... I know him, Vanessa said, her voice barely above a whisper. But in the silence that had fallen over the party, everyone heard it. My mother's head snapped toward Vanessa. What do you mean, you know him? I felt Daniel's hand tighten slightly around mine. This was the moment. The reveal that would make everything click into place for them. The moment they'd understand exactly how wrong they'd been about everything. She doesn't just know him, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the backyard. She dated him 12 years ago. Mum set them up. My mother's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, concentration, and then horrified recognition. Oh my God, Daniel, you're that Daniel. 12 years ago, my mother had been on one of her matchmaking crusades. Vanessa was 26, beautiful and single after breaking up with her college boyfriend. Mum had met Daniel at some professional networking event. He'd been there pitching his startup to potential investors and decided he'd be perfect for her older daughter. She'd arranged a coffee date, pushed Vanessa to give him a chance. He's handsome, polite, and he's going places, I remembered her saying. You could do worse. I'd been working at a small design firm, then living in my tiny apartment, invisible as always. I'd heard about the date second-hand days later, when Vanessa had complained about it over Sunday dinner. He spent the whole time talking about his startup, Vanessa had said, rolling her eyes. Something about technology platforms and changing how businesses operate. It was so boring, and he's just an engineer, not even a successful one yet. Just potential and dreams. My mother had looked disappointed. He seemed like such a nice young man. Nice doesn't pay bills, Mum. Vanessa had taken a sip of her wine. I need someone established. Someone with real money, not just potential. I'm not going to wait around for some tech guy's startup to maybe work out in 5 years. I remembered my father nodding along. Your sister's right to be practical. Dreams are fine, but security matters. Daniel had been sitting across from me now for years before I finally asked him about it. We'd been dating for 6 months, and I'd finally worked up the courage to mention that I had a sister. Did you ever date anyone my family set you up with? I'd asked over dinner in our favourite hole-in-the-wall Vietnamese restaurant. He'd looked confused for a moment, then recognition had dawned. Wait, Vanessa is your sister? The woman your mother set me up with 12 years ago? We'd both laughed at the absurdity of it. The cruel irony that the woman who'd rejected him had a sister who'd fall completely in love with him. But the story he'd told me that night had been different from Vanessa's version. In her telling, he'd been boring and beneath her. In his telling, she'd spent the entire coffee date on her phone, checking social media, barely listening when he spoke. She'd cut the meeting short after 45 minutes, saying she had somewhere to be. I could tell she wasn't interested, he'd told me. She was polite about it, but it was clear she thought I wasn't worth her time. I wished her well, and that was that. He'd been rejected plenty of times before. It hadn't bothered him. He'd gone back to his startup, his long hours, his vision for building something that mattered. And then, A year later, he'd walked into a coffee shop in downtown, where I happened to be sitting by the window sketching redesign concepts for a client's living room. My notebook was spread across the table, covered in drawings and fabric samples and paint swatches. He'd ordered his coffee and noticed me there completely absorbed in my work. He told me later that he'd been drawn to my focus the way I seemed entirely present in what I was doing. Most people in coffee shops were on their phones or laptops, distracted at multitasking. I was just there creating something completely engaged. He'd asked if he could sit down. I'd looked up, surprised anyone had noticed me, and said yes. We talked for 3 hours. Not about money or status or impressive careers. About work that mattered. About building things that helped people. About the difference between success that looked good and success that felt good. He told me about his platform that was starting to gain traction. I told him about a space I'd designed for a women's shelter that had no budget but meant everything to me. He'd asked for my number. I'd given it, barely believing someone like him would actually call. But he did, the next day, and the day after that. 6 months later, we were engaged. A year after that, married in a quiet ceremony with just close friends because I couldn't bear the thought of my family turning even that day into something about them. Now, standing in Vanessa's backyard with Daniel beside me, I watched my sister process all of this. Watched her remember the man she'd dismissed. Watched her recognize what he'd become. Watched her understand that her little sister, invisible, overlooked Michelle, had seen something she'd been too blind to notice. Daniel leaned down and whispered in my ear quiet enough that only I could hear. "Are you sure about this? We can still leave. You don't owe them this." I looked up at him. At this man who'd spent 10 years proving every day that he saw me, valued me, chose me. Who'd respected my need for privacy even when he didn't understand it. Who'd dropped everything to drive 40 minutes because I'd finally said it was time. I nodded. I was sure. Vanessa finally found her voice. "That was 12 years ago. He was nobody then." "He was somebody," I said quietly. "You just couldn't see it." "I didn't know." "You didn't care to know. There's a difference." Around us, relatives were starting to put the pieces together. I could hear the whispered conversations. "That's Daniel Howard. The Daniel Howard. His company just sold for how much? She's been married to him for 10 years. My mother looked like she might faint. "Michelle, why didn't you tell us? Why?" "Because you didn't deserve to know I thought. Because you would have found a way to make it about Vanessa. Because I finally had something precious and I wasn't going to let you touch it. But what I said was simpler. I did tell you. 8 years ago, I brought him to Sunday dinner. You barely spoke to him. Vanessa implied I was delusional for thinking he'd stay with me. So I decided you didn't get to be part of this part of my life." The silence was deafening. Daniel's thumb stroked the back of my hand, a gentle reminder that he was there, that I wasn't alone in this, that we could leave whenever I wanted. But I wasn't ready to leave yet. She rejected the man. But I saw the soul. One of Vanessa's guests, a man in an expensive polo shirt I didn't recognize, was staring at Daniel with his mouth slightly open. He'd been looking at his phone and now his eyes kept darting between the screen and Daniel's face like he was confirming something impossible. "Wait," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Mr. Howard Daniel Howard, co-founder of Howard Tech." The name seemed to ripple through the crowd like electricity. Howard Tech. Even people who didn't follow the technology industry had heard of it. It had been featured in Forbes' Fortune, The Wall Street Journal, a platform that revolutionized how mid-sized businesses manage their operations, turning what used to take teams of people into something elegant and intuitive. Daniel gave a slight nod, the kind of modest acknowledgement he always gave when people recognized him. He'd never been comfortable with the attention, even after the company became successful. "That's right." "Oh my God," the man said. "I use your platform at my company. It's incredible. saved us probably $200,000 a year in operational costs. More phones came out, more frantic Googling. I could see the exact moment people found the articles, the profiles, the estimated net worth figures that journalists loved to speculate about. Their expressions changed from confusion to shock to something like awe. My mother was still standing, frozen, her gin and tonic forgotten in her hand. "You run a technology company?" "Co-founded," Daniel corrected gently. He was always precise about that. He'd had 2 partners in the beginning, though one had left early on. "Michelle and I built it together." The words hung in the air for a moment before their meaning registered. Michelle and I. I watched my mother's face as she processed it. Watched Vanessa's frozen expression crack slightly. Watched relatives turn to stare at me with new eyes like they were seeing me for the first time. "We co-founded the company 10 years ago," I said quietly. Not loudly, not boasting, just stating a fact. "Right after we got married." The polo shirt man looked between Daniel and me. You're that Michelle Howard." I didn't answer. I just stood there, Daniel's hand in mine, and let them figure it out. More furious Googling. I knew what they were finding because I'd seen the articles myself, though I'd never shared them with anyone in my family. Profiles of Daniel and me, photos of us at industry events I'd attended, articles about the power couple behind Howard Tech, features about my design philosophy and how it had influenced the user interface that made the platform so intuitive. "Interior designer turned tech entrepreneur," one article had called me. The aesthetic eye behind Howard Tech's famous user experience. My mother looked like someone had just told her the sky was actually green. You started a technology company." "Yes." "When? How?" "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because you never asked, because every time I tried to share anything about my life, you changed the subject to Vanessa, because I learned that the only way to protect my achievements was to keep them far away from you. But what I said was simpler. I tried to tell you. You didn't listen." Uncle Ron had apparently found a financial article. "It says here you sold the company for..." "Jesus Christ!" He looked up at us, his face pale. "Is this number right?" "We sold 70% 2 years ago," I said, still not mentioning the figure. Let them read it themselves. Let them see exactly how wrong they'd been about me. "We retained 30% and Daniel stepped down as CEO. We wanted to focus on other projects." Vanessa had been silent through all of this, but now she found her voice. It came out defensive, almost aggressive. "Michelle never mentioned she was in business. She always said she was an interior designer." "I am an interior designer," I said calmly. "That's where it started. Daniel needed someone to make his platform beautiful. I designed the interface, the user experience, the visual language. Then I kept designing. I never stopped. I just expanded what I was designing from spaces to systems." "You never told us," Vanessa insisted, like it was my fault she didn't know. "You never said anything about a company or technology, or you never asked about my work." I interrupted and my voice was quiet, but it carried. "Not once in 10 years did you ask what projects I was working on. You assumed I was doing small residential jobs barely scraping by. You assumed wrong." The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. I could see relatives exchanging glances, remembering conversations where they'd made similar assumptions, where they'd pitied me or dismissed me, or implied that my work wasn't real work because I didn't talk about it the way Vanessa talked about her business. Cousin Jennifer looked sick. I remembered her words from earlier. Freelance work must be so flexible. She'd meant unstable. She'd meant I probably couldn't pay my bills. My mother was shaking her head slowly, like she could rewind time through sheer force of will. "I don't understand. Why would you hide this from us? We're your family." "I didn't hide it," I said. "I just stopped sharing it after you made it clear you weren't interested. There's a difference. That's not fair." 8 years ago, I brought Daniel to Sunday dinner. Do you remember what you said to me after he left? I looked directly at my mother. You said, "Don't get your hopes up, sweetheart. Men like that have options." You assumed I couldn't possibly be enough for him. You didn't ask about our relationship. You didn't ask about his work. You didn't ask about mine. You just assumed I was punching above my weight and would end up hurt. My mother's face flushed. I was trying to protect you. You were dismissing me, like you've dismissed me my entire life. Daniel squeezed my hand gently. He was giving me space to say what I needed to say, but also reminding me he was there, that we could leave whenever I wanted. But I wasn't done yet. The man in the polo shirt was still staring at his phone. The articles say you're one of the most sought-after strategic consultants in the industry, that companies pay 6 figures just to get on your waiting list. I didn't respond to that. Didn't need to. Vanessa made a small sound, something between a gasp and a choke. I looked at her and saw understanding starting to dawn on her face, saw her putting pieces together, saw her remembering that conversation from earlier about the mysterious consultant called the Ghost. But she wasn't ready to voice that realization yet. Neither was I. Let her wonder. Let them all wonder. They finally saw me, but they still didn't know everything. The party had fractured into small clusters of conversation, everyone trying to process what they'd just learned. I could hear fragments of whispered exchanges, relatives recalibrating their entire understanding of who I was. But I also noticed something else. Several of Vanessa's business associates were looking at her with new interest, new questions forming on their faces. One woman in particular, elegant in a cream pantsuit, seemed to be studying Vanessa with the kind of intensity that comes from putting puzzle pieces together. She'd been standing near the appetizer table earlier when the conversation about consultants had come up. Now she was making her way over to us, her expression thoughtful. "Vanessa," she said, her voice carrying that careful politeness of someone about to ask an uncomfortable question. "I've been meaning to ask you something. Your company scaled remarkably fast over the past 5 years. What was your secret? How did you manage such consistent strategic growth?" It was a reasonable question, a natural question, the kind any business person would ask a peer who'd achieved notable success. But I watched Vanessa's face and saw panic flicker across it just for a second before she smoothed it into her practiced smile. "Oh, well, you know," Vanessa said, her voice a little too bright. "Hard work, long hours. I've been fortunate to have good advisors." "Advisors," the woman repeated, latching onto the word. "Anyone in particular, I'm always looking for good strategic counsel. The right consultant can make or break a growth phase." Vanessa's eyes darted to me, then away. "Just, various people, a team approach." Daniel, who'd been quiet beside me, chose that moment to speak. His voice was mild conversational, but I knew him well enough to hear the edge beneath it. He was angry on my behalf, even if he'd never show it openly. "Michelle has advised quite a few companies, actually," he said as casually as if he were commenting on the weather. "She has a gift for seeing what others miss. Strategic blind spots, operational inefficiencies, growth opportunities that aren't obvious to people too close to the problem." The woman in the cream pantsuit turned to look at me with renewed interest. "Really, what kind of consulting do you do?" "Strategic advisory," I said simply. "Mostly for mid-sized companies trying to scale. I help them identify what's actually holding them back versus what they think is holding them back. Those are usually 2 different things." "Do you have a Firm A website?" "No, I work by referral only. I prefer to stay out of the spotlight." Another guest, a man who'd been listening to our conversation, spoke up. "Wait, are you talking about that consultant everyone whispers about, the one who fixed the Meridian deal last year?" I didn't answer, just took a sip of my sparkling water. "Oh my God," the woman said, her eyes widening. "Are you? The Ghost?" The Ghost. That nickname had started about 3 years ago when I'd helped a manufacturing company restructure a deal everyone thought was dead. I'd identified 3 overlooked clauses, that when properly leveraged turned a disaster into a windfall. The CEO had tried to thank me publicly, wanted to write a testimonial, but I declined. I didn't need the publicity. Didn't want it, actually. But word spreads in business circles, especially when someone consistently produces results. People started calling me the ghost because I worked behind the scenes, never took credit, left no public trail except the dramatically improved outcomes for my clients. Some people thought I was multiple people. Some thought I was an urban legend. Most of my clients were contractually obligated not to disclose my identity or involvement. It had suited me perfectly. I could do work I found meaningful, help companies I believed in, and keep my professional life completely separate from my family's awareness. "I've heard about you," the man said, excited now. "My business partner tried to get on your client list last year, said you were impossible to reach." "I'm selective about projects," I said. Vanessa had gone very still. I could see her processing this, her mind working backward through the years, thinking about her own company's growth, the deals that had mysteriously worked out, the strategies that had seemed so brilliant when she presented them to her board. The woman in cream was persistent. "Vanessa, you must have worked with incredible consultants to achieve the growth you did. Anyone you'd recommend?" Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Various people, like I said. "But specifically," the woman pressed, "your growth pattern is almost identical to 3 other companies I know of that all worked with the ghost. Similar trajectory, similar breakthrough moments. The signature is unmistakable once you know what to look for." I watched Vanessa's face, watched the exact moment the foundation of her professional confidence began to crack. She was remembering. I could see it in her eyes. Remembering the email suggestions I'd sent over the years, the casual thoughts I'd shared about her deals when she'd called me in a panic, the lucky breaks that had saved her company again and again. She'd thought they were lucky, she'd thought she was brilliant. She'd never once considered that her overlooked little sister might be the reason behind every major success she'd achieved. Daniel's hand found mine again. He knew what I was doing, knew I was letting the truth reveal itself, slowly letting other people ask the questions so I didn't have to. My mother had been listening to this exchange, looking increasingly confused. "Michelle, I don't understand. You said you were an interior designer." "I am an interior designer," I said patiently. "I design spaces, I design systems, I design strategies. It's all the same skill, understanding how things work, seeing what's missing, creating something functional and beautiful." "But Vanessa's company?" My mother stopped her looking between us. "What about Vanessa's company?" I asked quietly. No one answered, but everyone was looking at Vanessa now, waiting for her to confirm or deny what they were starting to suspect. Vanessa's face had gone pale again. Her hands were trembling slightly. She set down her champagne glass. She'd gotten a new one after dropping the first and wrapped her arms around herself. "Michelle," she said, and her voice was small. "Can we talk privately?" "No," I said simply. "Anything you want to say, you can say here." "Please, I just need to..." "To what? To spin this? To control the narrative? I'm done with private conversations where you get to rewrite history." The guests around us had gone silent, sensing the tension, the shift in power dynamics that was happening right in front of them. Vanessa looked around at all the watching faces, then back at me. "You helped me, didn't you, all those times? That was you!" I didn't confirm it, didn't deny it, just held her gaze. "Why," she whispered, "why would you help me if we..." "That's a good question," I said. "Why would I help someone who spent her whole life treating me like I didn't matter?" She had no answer for that. And just like that, the foundation started to crack. The crack in Vanessa's foundation was visible now, spreading like a fracture in glass. She stood there, surrounded by her guests, her business associates, her carefully curated image of success, and I could see her trying to calculate how to contain this, how to spin it, how to make it look like anything other than what it was. But there was no spin for this. I watched her for a long moment, then smiled. Not warmly, just a small, polite smile. "If you'll excuse me," I said to the group at large, "I need to make a quick call." Daniel squeezed my hand once before I let go a silent question. "Are you sure?" I was sure. I walked toward the side of the house, away from the main party, toward a quiet corner near Vanessa's perfectly manicured rose garden. I could feel eyes following me, hear the immediate burst of whispered conversations the moment I was out of direct earshot. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. The draft had been sitting there for 3 days since the moment my mother had called to demand I come to this party. I'd written it then, knowing I might need it, knowing that eventually I'd reach a point where enough was enough. That point was now. The email was addressed to Vanessa's company board. 3 members, all of whom I'd worked with directly over the past 5 years though. They'd known me only through encrypted communications and video calls, where I never showed my face. They knew my work. They knew my value. They didn't know my name was Michelle Howard, that I was Vanessa's sister, that every brilliant strategy they thought Vanessa had developed had actually come from me. The email was simple, professional, courteous, giving no explanation beyond what was necessary. "Dear board members effective immediately, I am resigning from my position as a strategic consultant for your company. All future decisions will be solely under the direction of your CEO, Vanessa Morrison, without my input or guidance. It has been a privilege to work with your organisation. I wish you continued success. Regards, M. Howard, Strategic Advisory Services." I copied Daniel on it. He knew this was coming. We'd talked about it 2 years ago when I'd first told him I was thinking of pulling back from Vanessa's company. He'd supported whatever I decided, but he'd also warned me, "When you stop holding her up, she's going to fall. Are you ready for that?" I hadn't been ready then. I was ready now. I hit send. The email disappeared from my drafts folder, delivered instantly to 4 inboxes. I stood there in Vanessa's rose garden surrounded by flowers she probably paid someone else to maintain, and felt something settle in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly, not revenge, just completion. Like I'd finally set down a weight I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. I walked back to the party. Daniel saw me coming and held out his hand. I took it, letting him pull me close to his side. We stood there together and I counted. 10 seconds, 15, 20. Then I heard it. A sharp intake of breath from across the yard. I turned to see Vanessa staring at her phone, her face going from pale to white to something almost grey. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She looked up, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found me. For a moment we just stared at each other across the distance of her perfectly landscaped backyard. Then she started moving toward me fast, almost running in her designer heels. "Michelle," she reached me slightly breathless. "What did you just do? Tell me this is a joke. Tell me you didn't just resign." I finished calmly. "I did, effective immediately." "You can't." Her voice was rising, panic bleeding through. "You can't just quit. We have the Morrison deal closing next month. The board presentation is in 3 weeks. The restructuring plan is yours to handle," I said. "You're the CEO. I'm sure you'll figure it out." "But She stopped, glanced around at the people watching us, lowered her voice to a frantic whisper. "Michelle, I need that guidance. You know I need what I know." I interrupted, keeping my voice quiet but clear. "Is that you've spent years taking credit for work you didn't do. You've built an entire reputation on strategies I developed, and every time someone praised your business acumen, you smiled and accepted it as if it was your own brilliance. That's not fair. You never said you wanted credit." "I never wanted credit." My voice was hard now. "I wanted you to acknowledge that you needed help. I wanted you to respect what I was giving you. Instead, you looked right through me at every family dinner, every holiday, every single time we were in the same room. You never once asked how my work was going because you assumed I had nothing worth talking about. Vanessa's eyes were filling with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or strategic. I didn't know it was you. You never told me. I told you 5 years ago, I said flatly. You called me crying because you were about to lose your biggest client. I walked you through exactly what to do to save the contract. The next week, I saw you on LinkedIn posting about your innovative problem-solving skills. I sent you an email that day offering to formalize our arrangement to actually work together openly. You never responded. Her face told me she remembered and had chosen to forget. You said you never needed my help, I continued. You told Mum just last Christmas that you'd built everything yourself, that some people were just naturally good at business, so now you get to prove it. Michelle, please, her voice broke. Don't do this. Not now. Not like this. Why not now? I asked. Because you're surrounded by people who are starting to understand what you really are. Because your business associates are putting together that every success you've had might not actually be yours. You're punishing me for something that happened when we were kids. I'm not punishing you at all. I said and I meant it. I'm just done carrying you, done being invisible while you shine, done giving you pieces of myself that you never valued. Daniel's hand tightened on my waist, supportive and steady. The email has been sent, I said. The board will have it by now. You're on your own, Vanessa, just like you always claimed you were. I turned away from her, then turning toward Daniel, ready to leave this party and these people behind. You'll regret this, Vanessa said behind me, her voice shaking with something between rage and desperation. When my company fails, when people find out you sabotaged me, I looked back at her over my shoulder. I didn't sabotage you, I just stopped saving you. There's a difference. You'll either figure it out or you won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. Her phone buzzed again, probably the board members responding, asking for clarification, trying to understand what this meant for upcoming projects. I watched her look down at the screen, watched her face crumble as reality set in. I wasn't punishing her. I was setting her free to fail. And fail she did. The first week after the party, I heard nothing. No calls, no texts, no frantic messages from my mother demanding I explain myself. It was blissfully quiet. Daniel and I went back to our normal life, him working on his new philanthropic technology projects, me finishing designs for a boutique hotel in Santa Barbara. We had dinner with friends who actually knew us, who valued us, who'd never once made us feel like we had to prove our worth. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 35 years. Then exactly 7 days after I'd sent that resignation email, my phone rang at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Vanessa's name lit up my screen. I stared at it for 3 rings. Daniel looked up from his bookstore who was calling and raised an eyebrow. Your decision, he said quietly. I answered on the 4th ring. Hello. Michelle, thank God. Vanessa's voice was breathless, frantic. I've been trying to reach you all day. Why weren't you answering? I was working. I need you to look at something right now. It's urgent. The Brennan Corporation contract. There's a clause they're threatening to invoke that I don't understand, and if we can't resolve it by tomorrow morning, they're pulling out. It's a $40 million deal, Michelle. $40 million. I said nothing, just held the phone and listened to her panic. Did you hear me? Her voice pitched higher. I need you to help me figure this out. I sent you an email with all the details 2 hours ago. Did you see it? I saw it. And I'm not your consultant anymore, Vanessa. I resigned. Remember. A pause. Then, you can't be serious. You're really going to let my company lose this deal over some petty family drama. Petty family drama. That's what she was calling it. 35 years of being invisible, dismissed to used. Petty. This has nothing to do with family, I said calmly. This is business. You're the CEO. You have a board, a legal team, other advisors. Use them. I did. They don't know how to handle this specific situation. You do. You always know. You have to help me. I don't have to do anything. Michelle, please. Her voice cracked. You don't understand. If this deal falls through, the board is going to start asking questions. They're going to wonder why everything worked perfectly when you were consulting, and now suddenly, you have to actually do the job you've been taking credit for. I finished. Yes, that must be difficult. That's not fair. You said I was just part-time support with no important contributions. I said my voice even. Those were almost your exact words at the party. So, handle it yourself. I heard her breathing hard on the other end of the line, then quieter, smaller. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. Michelle. Good night, Vanessa. I hung up. Daniel set down his book. How do you feel? I thought about it. Good, I said, surprised to find it was true. I feel good. And even knowing she might lose that contract. Especially knowing that. I looked at him. Is that terrible? No, he said. It's human. She made her bed by taking credit for your work. Now she gets to lie in it. The phone rang again. Vanessa. I sent it to voicemail. She called 4 more times that night. I didn't answer any of them. 2 weeks later, I was at a client meeting when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. When I checked it later, it was from someone on Vanessa's board. A simple message: the Brennan deal fell through. V couldn't resolve the clause issue. Board concerned about recent performance decline. Thought you should know. I didn't respond. That evening, Vanessa called again. This time, her voice was different. Not frantic, broken. Michelle, she said when I answered, please, I don't know how to fix this. Fix what? Any of it. Another client is threatening to leave. The Peterson account. They're saying our strategic direction has become unclear. The board scheduled a meeting to review my performance. My performance. She laughed, but it sounded like crying. Do you know what they asked me? They asked me to explain my strategic methodology, to walk them through my decision-making process for the last 3 major deals. And I couldn't. I stayed silent. Because it wasn't mine. She continued, her voice barely a whisper. None of it was mine. I've spent all day going through old emails, years of emails. Every time I had a problem, every time I needed to make a big decision, I'd call you or text you or email you. And you'd send back these casual thoughts, these suggestions. And every single one of them was brilliant. Every single one of them saved me. I'm glad you finally noticed. How long? She asked. How long were you doing this? 5 years. Since you first called me crying about losing a client and I walked you through how to save the relationship. That long. Her voice was hollow. 5 years of taking credit for your work. 5 years of me letting you take credit. I corrected. Because I was stupid enough to think that maybe if I helped you succeed, you'd finally see me as someone valuable, someone worth respecting. I did respect you. No, you didn't. You used me. There's a difference. Silence on the other end. Then, what do I do now? Maybe you should have learned instead of taking credit, I said. Maybe you should have actually tried to understand the strategies instead of just copying them. Maybe you should have built real skills instead of a reputation based on my work. Michelle, I can't do this without you. I'm going to lose everything. Then lose it. How can you be so cold? I'm not cold, I said. I'm just done being warm to people who use my heat and give me nothing back. I hung up again. The calls kept coming over the next few weeks. Sometimes from Vanessa, sometimes from my mother demanding I stop being petty and help your sister. Once from an aunt who'd heard through the family grapevine that I was sabotaging Vanessa's business. I blocked most of them. A month after the party, I got a text from the same board member who'd contacted me before. Second major client departed, V struggling in board meetings, emergency review scheduled. This is becoming serious. I showed it to Daniel over breakfast. He read it, then looked at me. Any regrets, Georgie? None. Even if her company fails completely. She built that company on my foundation, I said. If it can't stand without me, then it was never really hers to begin with. He smiled. There's the woman I married. I smiled back. She was here all along. She just stopped hiding. The truth was, I'd known this would happen. I'd known the moment I stopped supporting Vanessa that everything would start to crumble. Because I'd been there for every significant decision, every major strategy, every crisis that seemed to miraculously resolve itself. She thought she was brilliant. She thought she had natural business instincts. She never knew that I'd been holding her up all along. She never knew that I'd been holding her up all along. But she was about to find out exactly how much. I learned the full extent of Vanessa's realization, not from her directly, but from fragments. A voicemail she left at 3 a.m. that was just breathing and crying. A text from my mother. Your sister is having a breakdown and it's your fault. A message from that board member again. V spent entire board meeting unable to explain strategic rationale for past decisions. Requested 2-week leave. This is worse than we thought. But the most telling piece came from Tyler. He called me on a Thursday evening, his voice uncertain, in the way 16-year-olds' voices get when they're trying to sound adult but can't quite manage it. Aunt Michelle, it's Tyler. Can I talk to you? I almost didn't answer, but something in his message preview made me pick up. Hello, Tyler? I know you're probably mad at me. For the pool thing, I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't think... I thought it was just funny, but it wasn't. It was mean. Yes, it was. My mum's been really weird lately. She's in her office all the time going through old emails. She's not sleeping. She keeps crying and then getting angry and then crying again. He paused. Did something happen? Besides the party, I chose my words carefully. Your mother is realizing some things about her business, things she should have realized a long time ago. About you helping her? Smart kid. Yes. She said you were sabotaging her, that you're trying to destroy her company because of family stuff. Is that what you think? A long pause. I don't know, but I heard her on the phone with Grandma. She was going through emails and crying, saying she didn't understand how she missed it. That every time she thought she'd been smart, it was actually you. Is that true? Yes. Oh. Another pause. That's a lot. Yes, it is. Are you going to help her? No. Even if her company fails, and Mum? Even then. I could hear him thinking on the other end of the line. I guess that makes sense. She did treat you pretty badly. Everyone did. Thank you for noticing. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. About the pool, about laughing, about being a jerk. Apology accepted, Tyler. After we hung up, I sat with what he told me. Vanessa was going through the emails, all of them, 5 years of correspondence laid out like a map of her borrowed success. I could picture it because I knew what was there. I'd kept copies of everything, not because I planned to use it against her, but because I document all my consulting work. Professional habit. The first email would have been from 5 years ago. April. Vanessa had called me panicked because her largest client was threatening to leave over a pricing dispute. She'd tried negotiating but made it worse. I'd sent her what I'd labelled as random thoughts in the email, hey, just thinking about what you mentioned, What if you approached it not as a pricing negotiation, but as a value demonstration? Show them what they'd lose by leaving versus what they gain by staying at current terms. Also, that clause in Section 7.3 of their contract could be leveraged here. Just a thought, hope it helps. She'd used that exact approach, saved the client, got praised by her board for innovative problem solving. She'd never thanked me. Then there was the Foster merger, 6 months later. I'd sent her a detailed breakdown disguised as casual sisterly advice. Saw your LinkedIn post about the merger. Exciting. Random thought. Have you looked at their intellectual property portfolio? Seems like there might be some overlap with your patents that could either be a huge asset or a potential liability, depending on how you structure it. Also, their Q3 numbers look weird to me. Might want to dig deeper before finalising terms. But what do I know, right? Just throwing thoughts out there? She'd presented that analysis to her board as her own due diligence. The merger had gone through with protections that saved her company millions. She'd never acknowledged where the insight came from. I knew what else she was finding because I knew what I'd sent. The Brennan contract that had just fallen through, I'd identified that problematic clause 8 months ago and sent her a note about it. Thought of you today saw a similar contract structure blow up for another company. The reciprocal termination clause can be a nightmare if market conditions shift. Might want to add some protective language, just being paranoid probably. She'd ignored that one, and now she was paying for it. Every successful pitch I'd casually mentioned the key selling points. Every crisis averted I'd sent thoughts that solved it. Every strategic pivot her board praised I'd suggested it, in some offhand comment she'd presented as her own insight. 5 years of emails, hundreds of them. A complete roadmap showing that every significant success in her career had my fingerprints on it. According to Tyler, she'd been in her office for 12 hours straight, reading through them all, realising, understanding, seeing herself clearly for probably the first time in her life. I imagined her sitting there, head in her hands, her entire professional identity crumbling around her. Everything she'd told herself about being a natural entrepreneur, about having good instincts, about being self-made, all of it built on foundation I'd provided. I knew from the board members' messages that she'd tried to explain it to them, tried to say she'd had a consultant she'd been working with, but couldn't provide proper documentation because our arrangement had been informal. They'd asked why an informal consultant would suddenly resign, why she couldn't simply hire another consultant if strategic guidance was what she needed, why she couldn't replicate the strategic thinking that had seemed to come so naturally to her for years. She had no good answers. Part of me, a small part I wasn't proud of, wondered if she'd finally call to offer a real apology, to acknowledge what she'd done, to maybe possibly try to make things right. But another message from Tyler answered that question. She's angry now. She stopped crying. She called Grandma and said you trapped her, that you helped her knowing you could use it against her later, that this was all some long game to destroy her. Of course, that's what she'd tell herself, because Vanessa had spent her entire life being the victim of her own decisions, blaming everyone else when her choices caught up with her. She couldn't accept that she'd built everything on borrowed brilliance, couldn't admit that the throne she'd been sitting on was made of my uncredited work, my unpaid labour, my invisible contributions. It was easier to believe I'd sabotaged her than to accept she'd sabotaged herself. She built her throne on my silence, and now the silence was gone. And now the silence was gone. But the consequences were still unfolding. Tyler called me again 3 weeks after our first conversation. This time his voice was different, quieter, more thoughtful, like he'd been processing something heavy. Aunt Michelle, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you help my mum if you knew she wasn't, if she was taking credit for your work? It was a good question. An adult question. I pulled into my driveway. I'd been coming home from a client meeting, and sat in the car to give him my full attention. Because I hoped that if I helped her succeed, she might finally see me as someone valuable, someone worth respecting. Did it work? No, she just took more. That sucks. Yes, it does. I heard her on the phone with the board yesterday, he said. She was in her office, but I could hear her through the door. She was shouting about how she can't lose the company, that it's all she has. She was crying really hard. I stayed quiet, letting him work through whatever he needed to say. And then, after she hung up, I heard her talking to herself. Or maybe to Grandma on another call, I don't know. But she said, "Without Michelle, I don't know what I'm doing. I never knew what I was doing." His voice dropped. Is that true? Did she really not know how to run her own company? She knew some things, I said carefully. But the strategic thinking, the crisis management, the complex problem solving that came from me. She never tried to learn those skills herself. She just borrowed mine. For 5 years. Yes. That's really messed up. Yes, it is. I heard him take a breath. When I pushed you in the pool, everyone laughed. I thought it was funny. But it wasn't funny, was it? No. It was mean. Like really mean. And I did it because Mum was always talking about how you were so serious and you needed to lighten up. And Grandma always said you were too sensitive. So I thought, I don't know what I thought, that it would be funny. Tyler, you're 16, you're learning. The fact that you're thinking about this now means you're growing up. I remembered something, he said quietly. After I pushed you in when you climbed out, you looked at everyone. You were dripping wet and your dress was ruined and you just looked at us. And nobody helped you. Nobody even asked if you were okay. And Mom just laughed. I remember. I'm really sorry. Not just sorry I did it, but sorry I didn't understand what it meant. What it meant that my whole family treated you like that. Thank you for saying that. Are you ever going to forgive Mum? I don't know. Right now, I'm not trying to punish her. I'm just not helping her anymore. There's a difference. He was quiet for a moment. Yeah, I think I get that. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. I sat in my car afterward thinking about how strange it was that a 16-year-old was showing more emotional awareness than adults twice his age. 2 days later, Daniel and I made a brief appearance at my mother's house for what she'd called a family dinner, though I suspected it was really an ambush to pressure me about Vanessa. We stayed for exactly 45 minutes, long enough to be polite, not long enough to be trapped into conversations I didn't want to have. As we were leaving, walking to our car parked on the street, Daniel said something that made me laugh. I don't even remember what it was, something about my mother's newest decorating choice involving far too many roosters, but I was smiling when I responded. You could destroy her career with one statement, Daniel said more seriously now. One public revelation about being the ghost, about the work you did for Vanessa's company. It would be over for her immediately. I looked at him. You know I won't do that. I know. I'm just saying you could. That's not who I am. I know that too. He opened my car door for me. So what do you want? I just want her to understand what she took for granted, I said, sliding into the passenger seat. I want her to know what it feels like to lose something she never appreciated while she had it. Is that terrible? No, it's human. What I didn't know was that Tyler was outside too. He'd come out to take the trash to the curb and he'd heard us talking. He told me about it later, weeks afterward when he called to update me on his mother's situation. I heard you and Uncle Daniel talking, he said, in the car that night at Grandma's house. What did you hear? That you could destroy Mum's career if you wanted to. That all you'd have to do is tell people you were the ghost and that she took credit for your work. My stomach tightened. Tyler, but you're not going to do that, are you? Even though she deserves it, even though she's been telling everyone you sabotaged her and trapped her and that you're doing this to hurt her. No, I'm not going to do that. Why not? Because revenge isn't the same as justice. And because destroying her completely wouldn't make me feel better. It would just make me into someone I don't want to be. He was quiet for a long moment. I thought you were being weak when you didn't fight back after the pool thing, when you just walked away. But you're not weak at all, are you? No, I'm not. You're merciful, there's a difference. I smiled. Yes, there is. Mum doesn't see it that way. She thinks you're punishing her. I know. But you're just letting her fall, because you're not holding her up anymore. Exactly. That's actually kind of worse, he said. Than if you were actively trying to hurt her, I mean. Because this way she only has herself to blame. I didn't respond to that, just let him sit with the realization. I'm going to therapy, he said after a minute. Starting next week. I told Mum I needed it. She thinks it's because I'm stressed about her company stuff, but really it's because I need to figure out why I thought it was okay to treat you like that. Why I learned to treat people like that. Tyler, that's really mature of you. I don't want to be like my mum or like Grandma. I want to be better. You already are better. You're choosing to be. After we hung up, I told Daniel about the conversation. He pulled me close, kissed the top of my head. That kid's going to be okay. Yeah, I agreed. He is. It was a crack in the wall of family dysfunction, of learned cruelty, of normalized dismissiveness. And walls, once they start cracking, can crumble fast. And walls, once they start cracking, can crumble fast. Vanessa's wall came down in stages, each one more devastating than the last. 2 months after I sent that resignation email, the board member who'd been updating me sent a longer message than usual. Emergency board meeting called. 3 major clients departed in 8 weeks. Financial projections show significant instability. V's performance under formal review. This is serious. I read the message over morning coffee. Daniel glanced at the screen and then at my face. How do you feel? Like watching a building collapse in slow motion when you've been warning people for years that the foundation was weak. Guilty. No. And I didn't. That surprised me a little. I'd expected to feel some guilt, some sense of responsibility for Vanessa's failure, but all I felt was a strange sort of vindication. Not pleasure in her pain exactly, more like validation, proof that I'd been right all along, that I had been holding her up, that her success had never really been hers. The board didn't fire her immediately. That would come later. First, they did what boards do. They documented everything, created paper trails, gave her chances to improve that she couldn't possibly meet. According to my source, they issued a formal, written warning, outlined specific performance deficiencies, requested a 90-day improvement plan with measurable objectives. Very corporate. Very proper. Very damning. Vanessa tried to hire other consultants. I heard about this through the industry grapevine. She'd reached out to 3 different strategic advisory firms looking for someone who could replicate what I'd done. She even tried to hire one of my competitors, a consultant I'd worked with on a joint project 2 years ago. He called me before accepting. Professional courtesy. Michelle. I got an interesting call from Vanessa Morrison. She's looking for strategic guidance. Said her previous consultant left abruptly. I'm getting the sense there's a story here. There is. Care to share? I was her previous consultant. I resigned because she was taking credit for my work and treating me like I was disposable. A pause. She's your sister, isn't she? I remember you mentioning a sister once. Yes. Family business. The worst kind. Another pause. She wants me to replicate your approach. Said you had a specific methodology for identifying strategic blind spots. Asked if I knew your process. What did you tell her? That every consultant has their own approach and mine wouldn't be the same as yours. She seemed disappointed. Are you going to work with her? Not after this conversation. I don't work with people who burn bridges with other consultants, especially not when those consultants are colleagues I respect. Word spread. Not through me, I never said anything publicly, but through those quiet, professional networks where reputation matters. Vanessa had burned me and people noticed. Other consultants turned her down, not out of loyalty to me necessarily, but because working with her had become a reputational risk. 1 month after the board's formal warning, she was placed on administrative suspension. Pending performance review, the official statement said. Corporate speak for, "We're building the case to terminate you." Tyler called me that night. Mom's been suspended from her own company. She's not allowed in the office. They're reviewing everything she's done for the past 2 years. How is she? Not good. She's lost a lot of weight. She doesn't sleep. She just sits in her office at home going through files, trying to find something she can use to prove she's competent without you. But she can't find anything because... He trailed off. Because it doesn't exist, I finished gently. Yeah. Is she calling me? Every day, multiple times. You're not answering, are you? No. Good. She's not ready to actually apologize. She's just looking for you to save her again. Smart kid. My phone records confirmed what Tyler said. Vanessa called me an average of 4 times a day. Sometimes more. I never answered. She left voicemails at first, frantic, pleading, angry, desperate by turns. Then she stopped leaving messages. Just called and called and called, like if she tried enough times I'd eventually break down and help her. I blocked her number after 3 weeks of this. I didn't need the constant reminder of her desperation. Didn't need to see her name lighting up my phone like an accusation. My mother called too. Those I answered occasionally, though I regretted it every time. Michelle, you have to help your sister. She's falling apart. She's experiencing the consequences of her own choices. You're being vindictive. This isn't like you. You're right. The old me would have helped her. The old me would have saved her again and she would have learned nothing. But I'm not the old me anymore. She's your sister. Family helps family. Family respects family. Family sees family. Family doesn't use family and then discard them when they're no longer convenient. 3 months after my resignation, the board made their decision. The message from my source was brief. Board requested V's resignation, offered advisory position with no decision-making authority, essentially a face-saving exit. She accepted. Her career as CEO is over. I sat with that news for a long time. Vanessa had built her entire identity around being a successful CEO, being the golden child who exceeded everyone's expectations, being the daughter who made our parents proud. And now, that was gone. Not because I'd destroyed it, not because I'd sabotaged her or revealed her secrets, or done anything vindictive, but because when I stopped holding her up, she couldn't stand on her own. Daniel found me in my office that evening, staring out the window, at nothing in particular. You heard? He said. The board asked for her resignation. He sat down across from me, waiting. I thought I'd feel triumphant, I said, or satisfied, or something, but I just feel tired. Tired of what? Of having been right, of knowing that she could have avoided all of this if she'd just treated me like a person instead of a resource. You gave her 5 years to figure that out. And she never did. So what happens now? Now she learns what everyone else learns eventually. That you can't build a life on borrowed gifts. That taking credit for someone else's work is just another form of theft. That eventually the bill comes due. My phone buzzed. Tyler. Mom just told me about the board decision. She's sitting in her room crying. Keeps saying it's all your fault. I wanted you to know she's still not getting it. I texted it back. Thank you for telling me. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm learning what not to become. I showed the exchange to Daniel. He read it and smiled sadly. At least one person in that family is learning something. He's young enough to change. Vanessa's been this way for 40 years. I don't think she can. Does that make you sad? I thought about it. A little. Not for her exactly. For what could have been if she'd been different. If they'd all been different. But they weren't different. No, they weren't. She didn't lose her job because of me. She lost it because she never actually learnt how to do it. She didn't lose her job because of me. She lost it because she never actually learned how to do it. But my family wasn't ready to accept that truth. The emergency family meeting was called for a Sunday afternoon, 2 weeks after Vanessa's forced resignation. My mother had called me personally, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. We need to discuss this situation with Vanessa. As a family. You need to be there. I don't need to be anywhere. Michelle. Her voice sharpened. Your sister has lost everything. The least you can do is show up and explain yourself. Something in her tone, the automatic assumption that I owed them explanations, that I was the one who'd done something wrong, made me want to refuse. But another part of me, the part that had spent 3 months away from these people and had grown stronger in the distance, wanted to face them one more time. I'll be there, I said. Daniel's coming with me. That's not necessary. It's not negotiable. He comes or I don't. A pause. Then, fine. Daniel and I arrived at my mother's house exactly on time. Not early, which would have suggested eagerness. Not late, which would have suggested I was afraid. Exactly on time because I had nothing to hide from and nothing to apologise for. The living room was full. Both my parents, Vanessa looking gaunt and hollow-eyed Tyler sitting slightly apart from his mother, Uncle Ron, and Aunt Patricia, Cousin Jennifer, and a few other relatives I barely knew. All of them turned to look when Daniel and I walked in. The silence was thick and hostile. Thank you for coming, my mother said in the tone of someone who'd been practicing this conversation. We wanted to discuss as a family what's been happening with Vanessa's company. You mean Vanessa's failure, I said calmly. Let's be clear about what we're discussing. Vanessa flinched. My mother's mouth tightened. Your sister has gone through a very difficult time, my father said. He looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow. She's lost her position as CEO. The company she built. The company she didn't build, I interrupted. The company I helped her build while she took all the credit. That's not how she tells it, Uncle Ron said. She says you sabotaged her, that you deliberately gave her bad advice and then pulled your support to make her look incompetent. I looked at him steadily. Do you believe that? Do you really think I spent 5 years giving my sister advice just so I could eventually make her fail? Do you understand how insane that sounds? What I understand, my mother said, her voice rising, is that your sister needed you and you abandoned her. How could you do this to her? How could you destroy her career out of some petty grudge about childhood? I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped building it for her. That's the same thing. No, it's not. Daniel's voice was quiet but firm. He'd been standing beside me silent until now. Michelle didn't sabotage Vanessa. She withdrew her labour. There's a fundamental difference. This doesn't concern you, my mother snapped. It absolutely concerns me. You're attacking my wife. Your wife is destroying this family. No, I said, and my voice cut through the rising argument. This family destroyed itself long before I stopped playing along. You want to know what really happened? Vanessa called me for 5 years every time she had a business problem. I solved them. She presented my solutions as her own ideas. She got promoted, praised, successful, all while treating me like I was barely worth noticing at family gatherings. And when I finally stopped helping her, she couldn't function because she'd never actually learnt to do her job. That's what happened. That's the truth. That's your version, Vanessa said. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying. You're making it sound like I used you. You did use me. I didn't know. I didn't know it was you helping me. You never said you wanted credit. I never said I wanted credit because I shouldn't have had to ask for basic acknowledgement. And you knew exactly who was helping you. You just chose not to think about it too hard because it was convenient. The room erupted into arguing voices. My mother defending Vanessa. Uncle Ron saying something about family loyalty. Cousin Jennifer muttering about how I'd always been jealous of Vanessa. Then Tyler stood up. Grandma, he said, his voice surprisingly loud. I need to say something. Everyone went quiet. Tyler never spoke up at family gatherings. He was usually on his phone bored, tuning out the adult drama. Now he was standing in the middle of the room and every eye was on him. Tyler, sit down, Vanessa said. This doesn't concern you. It does concern me, because I'm part of this. Again. He looked around the room, his face set with determination that made him look older than 16. At the birthday party, I pushed Aunt Michelle into the pool while she was wearing a formal dress. I did it on purpose and everyone laughed. People took videos. People thought it was hilarious, and not one single person helped her climb out. Not one person asked if she was okay. That was just kids being kids, Aunt Patricia said dismissively. No, it wasn't. Tyler's voice was firm. It was me being cruel because I'd learned from all of you that it was okay to treat Aunt Michelle like she didn't matter, like she was just there for us to use or laugh at or ignore. Tyler, Vanessa started. I'm not finished, Mum. He looked at her and I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before. Disappointment. I heard you crying on the phone with the board. I heard you say, without Michelle, I don't know what I'm doing. I never knew what I was doing. And that's when I understood. Aunt Michelle wasn't destroying you. She was just done saving you. The silence in the room was absolute. I didn't understand what it meant. Tyler continued, looking at me now. When you climbed out of that pool and said, remember this moment, I thought you were being dramatic, but you weren't. You were telling us to remember what we'd become, what we'd always been. People who used you and laughed at you and never once said thank you. That's enough, my mother said, but her voice shook. No, Grandma, it's not enough. Because everyone in this room is blaming Aunt Michelle for Mom losing her job. But Aunt Michelle didn't need us. She never needed us. She was successful and happy and married and had this whole amazing life we didn't even know about. But we needed her. He looked around at all the faces. We needed her to teach us how to be better people, how to be kind, how to see people who are quiet and don't demand attention. And all we did was laugh when she got pushed into a pool. No one spoke. No one seemed to know what to say. Tyler sat back down, his hands shaking slightly, but his face calm. He'd said what he needed to say. I looked at him and nodded slightly. A thank you. An acknowledgement, a recognition of his courage. He nodded back. A child saw what the adults refused to. A child saw what the adults refused to. But Vanessa wasn't interested in seeing. She was interested in striking back. I didn't know about her plan at first. How could I? Vanessa had stopped calling me, stopped. Leaving voicemails had apparently accepted that I wasn't going to help her rebuild what she'd destroyed. The silence from her end felt like relief. Finally, she was moving on. I was wrong. Tyler told me later, after everything came out, what his mother had been doing in the weeks following that family meeting, how she'd gone quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful but calculating, how she'd spent hours on her computer researching things he couldn't see, how she'd made an appointment with a lawyer and come home looking different, not hopeful, sharper, like she'd found a weapon. The lawyer's office was downtown expensive, the kind of place that specialized in messy family law and estate disputes. Vanessa had dressed carefully for the meeting, not her usual polished CEO look, but something softer, more vulnerable. Playing the victim was becoming her new role. "Ms. Morrison, how can I help you today?" "I need to know about contesting a will," she'd said. "Or potentially contesting inheritance rights?" The lawyer had leaned forward, interested. "Is there a will currently in probate?" "Not yet. My father passed away years ago, but my mother is still alive and I have reason to believe her will might not be legally sound." "What makes you think that?" This was where Vanessa had played her card, the one she'd been holding, examining, polishing like a weapon. "My sister isn't actually my mother's biological daughter. She's adopted, but I don't think my mother has properly structured her will to account for that. And my sister has been taking advantage of the family relationship to gain financial benefits she's not entitled to." The lawyer had sat back. "I see, and do you have proof of the adoption?" "I'm working on it." "You'll need definitive proof. DNA evidence would be ideal. Do you have reason to believe your sister doesn't know she's adopted?" "I know she doesn't know. My mother never told her." A pause. The lawyer had probably seen this kind of family ugliness before. If you can prove she's not biologically related, and if you can demonstrate that inheritance arrangements were made under false pretenses, you might have grounds to challenge. But I should warn you, these cases are expensive, messy, and often don't end the way people hope. I don't care about expensive. I care about justice. But it wasn't justice Vanessa wanted. Tyler understood that even if his mother didn't, it was revenge. It was taking from me what she felt I'd taken from her. If she couldn't be successful anymore, if she couldn't be the golden child who made everyone proud, then she'd make sure I couldn't have my place in the family either. She'd started collecting evidence the next time I came to a family dinner. It was small, casual, thrown together by my mother, who was still trying to maintain some semblance of family unity, despite the fractures showing in every interaction. Daniel and I had come because I was trying to maintain boundaries without cutting everyone off completely, trying to show that I could be present without being vulnerable. I should have known better. Vanessa had arrived late, slipping in quietly, not making her usual entrance. She'd been subdued through dinner, barely speaking, pushing food around her plate. I'd thought she was depressed about losing her position. I'd actually felt a twinge of something that might have been pity. She'd used my bathroom, taken a few strands of hair from my brush that I'd left in there from a previous visit. She'd taken the wine glass I'd been drinking from at dinner, wrapped it carefully in a napkin when no one was looking, slipped it into her purse. Tyler had seen that part. He'd been getting something from the kitchen and caught her wrapping the glass. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Nothing, baby, just cleaning up." But he'd known it wasn't nothing. He'd watched her, seen the calculation in her eyes, the way she checked to make sure no one else was watching. He'd confronted her later that night. "Why did you take Aunt Michelle's glass?" "I didn't." "I saw you." She'd looked at her son, this boy who was becoming a man who wouldn't lie for her anymore, and something in her face had cracked. "I need to know something. I need to prove something." "And prove what?" That she's not really my sister, not really part of this family." "What are you talking about?" "She's adopted Tyler. I'm sure of it. The way Mom acts around her, the way she's always been different. I'm going to prove it, and then everyone will understand. She's not one of us. She never was." Tyler had stared at his mother, seeing someone he didn't recognize. "Even if that's true, so what? That doesn't change anything she did for you. Doesn't change that you used her. It changes everything. It means she manipulated us, pretended to be family when she wasn't. That's not what adoption means, Mum." But Vanessa hadn't wanted to hear it. She'd sent the DNA samples to a testing lab, paid extra for rush processing, and waited. The results came back 10 days later. Tyler saw the envelope, saw his mother open it, saw her face shift from anticipation to shock to something cold and satisfied. "What does it say?" he had asked. "It says I was right. She's not Mum's biological daughter." "Are you going to tell Aunt Michelle?" "No, I'm going to tell everyone. At the next family gathering, I'm going to make sure they all understand what she really is." Tyler had called me that night, his voice urgent. "Aunt Michelle, I need to tell you something. Mom did something really messed up." He'd explained it all, the lawyer, the DNA test, Vanessa's plan to publicly reveal my adoption at the next family gathering, to humiliate me the way she felt humiliated, to take away the one thing she thought I still had my place in the family. I'd listened to all of it, phone pressed to my ear, Daniel watching my face change as Tyler spoke. "When is she planning to do this?" I'd asked. "Next Sunday. Grandma's planning a dinner. Mom's going to announce it there." "Thank you for telling me." "Are you okay?" I'd looked at Daniel, at the life we'd built at the home where I was valued and seen and loved. "I'm fine. Better than fine. Because Vanessa doesn't understand something." "What?" "That she's not revealing anything I need to hide. She's revealing her own desperation." After I hung up, Daniel had pulled me close. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing. Let her show everyone exactly who she's become." Sometimes the desperate don't realise that the truth cuts both ways. Sometimes the desperate don't realise that the truth cuts both ways. I was about to learn that lesson myself. Sunday dinner at my mother's house. I dressed carefully, not armour this time, but something softer, more like myself. A simple blue dress, minimal jewellery, my hair down. I wasn't preparing for battle. I was preparing to watch Vanessa destroy herself. Daniel squeezed my hand as we walked up the driveway. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure. Whatever she says, however she tries to hurt me, it doesn't change who I am." "No, it doesn't." The house was full again. More people than usual, actually. Vanessa had apparently told people this was an important family announcement, which meant half our extended family had shown up out of curiosity. Aunts, uncles, cousins I barely knew, all gathered in my mother's living room and dining room, holding drinks, making small talk, waiting for whatever drama was about to unfold. Vanessa saw me arrive. Our eyes met across the room. She was holding an envelope, plain white letter-sized. I knew what was in it. DNA test results showing I wasn't my mother's biological daughter. Her weapon, her revenge. She smiled at me. It was a terrible smile, cold and satisfied. I smiled back calmly and turned away to greet other relatives. I was talking to cousin Jennifer, who'd been noticeably nicer to me since learning about my success, when I felt a hand on my arm. Light, trembling slightly. I turned to see Aunt Carol, the elderly woman who'd stared at me at Vanessa's party and said I looked like Linda. "Michelle, sweetheart." "Guy." Her voice was urgent, quiet. "Can I speak with you privately right now?" Something in her face made me nod. "Of course." She led me out of the crowded rooms down the hallway to my mother's study. A quiet space. She closed the door behind us and turned to face me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Sorrow mixed with determination. "Sweetheart, you need to know something. Something your mother should have told you years ago, but didn't have the courage to say." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "I saw Vanessa arrive with that envelope. I know what she's planning to do. I overheard her talking to your Uncle Ron about DNA tests and proving you're not really family." She took both my hands in hers, her skin paper thin and warm. "I can't let her ambush you like that. I can't let her be the one to tell you." "Tell me what?" But I already knew. Tyler had warned me. Vanessa had the DNA results. "You're not your mother's biological daughter, dear. You're Linda's daughter, my niece Linda, your mother's older sister." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Tyler had told me Vanessa found out I wasn't biological family, but hearing the full truth, hearing whose daughter I actually was, hit differently. Linda died when you were about a year old. Aunt Carol continued, her voice gentle but steady. Car accident. She was a single mother, raising you alone. Your biological father had left before you were born. When Linda died, your mother and father took you in. They adopted you, raised you as their own. I pulled my hands away, pressed them against my face. Why didn't anyone tell me? Your mother couldn't. It was too painful. Linda was her older sister. They were close. When Linda died, your mother was devastated. And then she had to raise Linda's baby, and every time she looked at you, Aunt Carol's voice broke. Every time she looked at you, she saw her sister, saw her loss. She never wanted me. That's not quite true. She wanted to do right by you. She wanted to honour her sister's memory. But she couldn't bond with you the way she should have. You looked so much like Linda. Same eyes, same face. It was like having a ghost in the house. I sat down hard in my mother's desk chair. My whole life suddenly had a different context. The favouritism toward Vanessa, the distance, the way my mother could never quite look at me directly. It wasn't because I wasn't good enough. It was because looking at me hurt too much. Does Vanessa know? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. I don't think she knew the full story until recently, but I suspect she's figured it out, and knowing your sister, she's about to use it as a weapon. My sister? I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Is she even my sister? By law, yes. By blood, she's your cousin. But Michelle, dear blood doesn't make family. Love makes family. My mother never loved me. Your mother never let herself love you. There's a difference. She was trapped in her grief, and you were the walking reminder of what she'd lost. I stood up, paced to the window, looked out at nothing. My entire identity was reshaping itself in real time. I wasn't who I thought I was. My mother wasn't my mother. My sister wasn't my sister. The father who'd left the letter saying I was his daughter in the ways that mattered, he'd been telling me I was adopted without using those words. Did my dad know my adoptive father? Yes, he knew everything. He loved Linda. She was like a sister to him too. When she died, taking you in wasn't even a question for him. You were family. But Mom, your mother did her best. It wasn't good enough, but it was what she could manage. I heard voices getting louder in the living room. Vanessa was probably preparing to make her announcement, to reveal the secret that Aunt Carol had just given me first. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to hear it with love, not with cruelty. Because I've watched you your whole life being treated like you didn't belong, and it was wrong. Because Vanessa is about to use this information to hurt you, and I'll be damned if I let her be the one to tell you who you really are. I looked at this elderly woman who I barely knew, but who was showing me more compassion than my own mother ever had. Who was Linda? What was she like? Aunt Carol smiled. Strong, independent, creative. She was an artist, painted beautiful things. She loved fiercely and didn't care what people thought. You're exactly like her. My eyes filled with tears. I have a mother I never knew. You do, and she would have been so proud of who you've become. There was a knock on the door. Daniel's voice. Michelle. Everything okay? I opened the door. He saw my face and immediately put his arm around me. What happened? I just found out I'm adopted, that my biological mother died when I was a baby, that none of them are actually, hey. He turned me to face him. None of that changes who you are. You understand, you're still you. But everything, the way she treated me, it wasn't because I wasn't good enough. It was never because you weren't good enough. It's because I reminded her of losing her sister. I was a walking reminder of death. Aunt Carol spoke quietly behind me. Or you were a living reminder of love. She just couldn't see it that way. I took a shaky breath. Vanessa's about to announce this to everyone. She thinks it's her trump card. Then, let's go face it, Daniel said. Together. I looked at Aunt Carol. Thank you for telling me first, for giving me this with kindness. That's what family does, dear. Real family. We walked back toward the living room together. I could hear Vanessa's voice rising, calling for everyone's attention. The truth was about to come out. But Vanessa didn't know that I already knew, that her weapon had been diffused by an act of mercy. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It breaks you first. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It breaks you first. But sometimes in the breaking, you find pieces of yourself you never knew existed. I was wiping tears from my face, trying to compose myself enough to walk back into that living room and face whatever Vanessa was about to announce when Aunt Carol reached into her purse. Wait, she said. There's something else. Something I've been carrying for 3 years, waiting for the right moment. She pulled out an envelope. It was worn at the edges, yellowed slightly with age, my name written across the front in handwriting I recognised immediately, my father's handwriting. The careful, blocky letters he'd used for everything from grocery lists to birthday cards. Your father gave this to me about 6 months before he died, Aunt Carol said, pressing it into my hands. He made me promise to give it to you when you needed it most. I've been watching, waiting. I almost gave it to you at Vanessa's party when I saw how they treated you. But I knew it wasn't time yet. She looked at me steadily. It's time now. My hands were shaking as I looked down at the envelope. He knew. He knew this day would come. He knew your mother would never tell you the truth. He knew eventually someone else would or you'd find out somehow. He wanted you to hear from him, even if he couldn't be here to say it in person. I looked at Daniel. He nodded. Do you want privacy? No. Stay. I opened the envelope carefully, as if it might disintegrate. Inside was a letter, multiple pages written in that same careful handwriting. I unfolded it and began to read. My dearest Michelle, if you're reading this, it means you've learned the truth about where you came from. I'm sorry I'm not there to tell you myself. I'm sorry for a lot of things. But mostly, I'm sorry your mother and I couldn't give you the words you needed when you were young enough to hear them without the weight of years pressing down. You are my daughter in the most important way I chose to love you every single day. Not because I had to, not out of obligation or duty, but because from the moment I held you as a baby, just days after Linda died, you were mine. You were ours. You were family. Blood doesn't make family, sweetheart. Love does. Choice does. Showing up every day does. Your mother struggled. She still struggles. With grief, she never processed pain she never faced. Linda was her best friend, her sister, her confidant. When Linda died, something in your mother broke. And you, beautiful girl, you looked so much like Linda that every time your mother looked at you, she saw her sister, saw her loss, couldn't separate you from her pain. That's her burden, not yours. Do you hear me? That was never about you. You were never the problem. You were never too quiet or too serious or too anything. You were exactly right. You were always enough. I saw you. Every science fair I attended while your mother stayed home. Every art show, every parent-teacher conference where I went alone. I saw you. I saw a girl who was brilliant and creative and kind. A girl who deserved to be celebrated, not overlooked. I know by the time you read this, you'll have felt the weight of being second best your whole life, of watching Vanessa get the praise and attention while you got the scraps. I know because I saw it happening and I didn't stop it, and that's my greatest shame. I should have fought harder for you, should have made your mother see you, should have protected you better from the consequences of her grief. But I was a coward. I told myself that you were strong enough to handle it, that you didn't need the same kind of validation Vanessa did. But that was a lie I told myself to avoid the hard conversations. You did need it. Every child needs to be seen and valued and loved loudly. You deserved that, and we failed you. But here's what I need you to know. You didn't fail. You built a beautiful life. You became someone extraordinary. Not in spite of being overlooked, but because you learned early that your worth didn't depend on other people seeing it. You found it in yourself. I hope by now you've found people who see you clearly, who love you for exactly who you are, who celebrate you the way I always wanted to, but didn't do enough of. I hope you've built a family of choice that treats you better than your family of blood did. And I really hope you know that I loved you. Not as my duty, not as Linda's legacy, but as my daughter, my girl. The child who made me laugh with her dry observations about the world, who made me proud with every quiet achievement, who made me wish I'd been brave enough to love you louder. You were never the problem, Michelle. You were always the gift. I'm sorry I won't be there to tell you this in person. I'm sorry for all the times I should have spoken up and didn't. I'm sorry your mother couldn't give you what you deserved, but I'm not sorry you were my daughter. That was the best thing I ever chose. You are enough. You always were. Love, Dad. I couldn't see the last lines through my tears. They were falling freely now, dropping onto the paper, smudging his handwriting slightly. Daniel's arm was around me, holding me upright as I shook with the force of grief and relief and understanding all hitting at once. He knew, I whispered. He knew everything. He saw what was happening and he loved you, Daniel said quietly. He just didn't know how to fix it. He couldn't fix her grief. No one could. Aunt Carol's voice was gentle. He did what he could. It wasn't enough, but it was real. I read the letter again slower this time, letting each word sink in. My father had seen me, had loved me, had chosen me every single day, even when he couldn't make my mother do the same. He'd known I was enough, even when I spent 35 years believing I wasn't. There are pictures, Aunt Carol said softly, of Linda, of you, with her in the few months you had together. I have them at home. Whenever you're ready, I'll show you who your mother was. I nodded, unable to speak. In the living room, I could hear Vanessa calling for attention again. Everyone, I need to share something important about our family. She was about to reveal my adoption, about to use it as a weapon, thinking it would shame me or diminish me or prove I didn't belong. But she didn't know what I was holding in my hands. She didn't know that the truth I'd just learned, painful as it was, had also given me something precious. Proof that I was loved. Proof that I was chosen. Proof that family was about love, not blood. I folded the letter, carefully, put it back in the envelope and stood up. Daniel stood with me. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Yes." I looked at Aunt Carol. "Thank you for keeping this safe, for knowing when I needed it." That's what family does. I walked towards the living room with Daniel beside me and my father's letter in my hand. Vanessa could reveal whatever she wanted. She could tell everyone I wasn't really a member of this family. And I could finally agree with her. Because my real family, the people who chose me, who saw me, who loved me, they were already here. He loved me, I thought, pressing the letter against my heart. But he couldn't protect me from her pain. And now, that pain was about to become everyone's. I learned later what my mother did in the hours after Vanessa's attempted announcement. Tyler told me some of it. Aunt Carol filled in other pieces. But mostly I understood it because I found the letter myself weeks later when I finally had the courage to ask. My mother had been in the kitchen when Vanessa started calling everyone to attention. She'd heard the whispers, people saying Aunt Carol had pulled me aside, saying something about DNA tests and secrets. She'd seen Vanessa holding that envelope like a prize. And she'd known. In that moment, she'd known exactly what was about to happen. The secret she'd kept for 35 years was about to be exposed, not with love or gentleness, but as a weapon. as entertainment for relatives who'd gathered to watch our family tear itself apart. She'd left through the back door, didn't say goodbye, didn't try to stop Vanessa, just got in her car and drove. Tyler said she was gone for 3 hours, just disappeared while the family gathering fell apart in her absence. Vanessa had made her announcement, told everyone about the DNA test, about me not being real family, only to have Aunt Carol stand up and explain that everyone already knew that she'd told me herself with love the way it should have been done years ago. Vanessa's weapon had misfired. Instead of humiliating me, she'd revealed her own cruelty. People had left early, uncomfortable and disappointed. Tyler said the look on his mother's face when she realised her plan had failed was something he'd never forget. But my mother hadn't been there to see any of it. She'd been driving to the cemetery where my father was buried. She told me this herself later in a conversation that hurt us both. She'd gone to his grave because she didn't know where else to go, didn't know how to face what was happening, didn't know how to explain 35 years of silence and distance and grief she'd let poison everything. She'd stood at his headstone, and that's when she'd seen it. A small metal box, weathered but intact, partially hidden behind the grave marker. She'd opened it because she recognised her name written on an envelope inside. Another letter. My father leaving messages for the people he loved, trying to fix what he couldn't fix while he was alive. She'd sat down on the grass right there in the cemetery and read what he'd written to her. Darling, I know you can't love Michelle the way you love Vanessa. I've known that since the beginning. I see how you look at her, or rather how you don't look at her, how you flinch when she walks into a room, how you find reasons to be somewhere else when she needs you. I understand. I do. She looks like Linda. She sounds like Linda. She even laughs like Linda, and every time you see her, you see the sister. You lost the grief, you've never processed the hole in your heart you've tried to pretend isn't there. But she didn't choose this fate. She didn't ask to be Linda's daughter. She didn't ask to look like your sister. She didn't ask to be the living reminder of your greatest loss. She just asked to be loved. And I failed to give her that. I know by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I know you'll probably have kept this secret until the end, until someone else discovered it, or Michelle figured it out herself. I know, because I couldn't convince you while I was alive to tell her the truth, to let her know where she came from, to give her the gift of understanding why you couldn't connect with her. I hope you'll give her a chance, before I'm gone, after I'm gone. Whenever you finally find the courage to see her as Michelle, not as Linda's ghost, but as her own person who deserved better from us. She was never the problem. Your grief was the problem. And I let you nurse that grief instead of helping you heal from it, because I was a coward. Because it was easier to let you pull away from Michelle than to force you to face why you were pulling away. I failed her, but I failed you too. I should have made you get help. Should have made you talk about Linda's death. Should have insisted we work through the pain instead of letting it rot in silence. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. And you'll have a choice. You can keep pretending Michelle doesn't deserve your love, or you can finally give her what you should have given her from the beginning, the truth and the chance to be seen. I hope you choose her, before it's too late. I love you, but I loved her too, and she needed me to love her louder. I regret that I didn't. Please don't make the same mistake. My mother had cried there in the cemetery, Tyler told me later when he'd gone to find her. He'd tracked her phone, worried she'd done something drastic. He'd found her, sitting by my father's grave, holding a letter, sobbing in a way he'd never heard her cry before. "Grandma," he had said, approaching carefully. "Are you okay?" She'd looked up at him with swollen eyes. He knew. Your grandfather knew. He died knowing I'd failed Michelle. He died knowing I couldn't be the mother she deserved. Why couldn't you? Because every time I looked at her, I saw my sister, my dead sister, and I couldn't separate Michelle from that loss. Couldn't see her as her own person, just saw Linda's face on a child I had to raise but couldn't love. That's really messed up, Grandma. I know. She'd driven home, eventually gone into the attic, and pulled out boxes she hadn't opened in decades. Photo albums from before Vanessa was born. From when Linda was still alive. Pictures of her and Linda as children, as teenagers, as young women. Pictures of Linda pregnant, glowing, excited about becoming a mother. Pictures of infant Michelle in Linda's arms, both of them smiling. And then the photos stopped. Because Linda had died and my mother had put everything away, had boxed up her grief, along with the memories, had tried to pretend none of it had happened. She'd found pictures of young Michelle too. Birthday parties where Michelle looked small and uncertain, while Vanessa commanded the camera. School events where Michelle was in the background, always watching, never quite included. Christmas mornings where the present distribution told its own story, piles for Vanessa, modest stacks for Michelle. The evidence of a childhood spent invisible right there in photographs. She'd looked at those pictures and seen, maybe for the first time, not Linda's ghost, but a child who'd deserved better. A little girl who'd done nothing wrong except remind her adoptive mother of loss. Tyler said she'd called him that night, asked him to help her put together something for me. He didn't tell me what. Some apologies come too late, but maybe they still matter. But maybe they still matter. Or maybe they don't. Maybe what matters is what I choose to do with the truth now that I have it. I sat alone in a hotel room that night, staring at myself in the mirror above the desk. Daniel had wanted to stay, but I'd asked him for space. Not because I didn't want him there, but because I needed to have a conversation with myself that couldn't happen with anyone else in the room. The woman looking back at me was 35 years old, successful, accomplished, married to a man who loved her. She'd built a life that anyone would admire. But underneath all of that, she was still that little girl standing at the edge of a pool dripping wet, waiting for someone to help her up. I pulled out my father's letter and read it again. Then again. His words had broken something open in me, something I'd been keeping carefully sealed for decades. The careful compartments I'd built to survive my childhood were cracking apart. I spent 35 years waiting for them to see me, I said out loud to my reflection. My voice sounded strange in the empty room. Waiting for Mum to look at me the way she looked at Vanessa. Waiting for someone to tell me I mattered. The woman in the mirror looked tired. Not just physically tired, soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying weight you never asked for. But I never saw myself either, did I? I continued. I was so focused on getting them to validate me that I never stopped to validate myself. I thought, if I was successful enough, accomplished enough, quiet enough, perfect enough, then they'd finally love me. I thought about all the years I'd spent achieving in silence, building a company, creating beautiful spaces, helping other people succeed, all of it done with one eye, always looking back at my family, hoping they'd notice, hoping they'd be proud. I thought success would make them love me, I whispered, but success just taught me I don't need them to. That was the truth that I'd been circling for months, maybe years. I didn't need their approval anymore. Didn't need my mother to finally see me. Didn't need Vanessa to acknowledge what I'd given her. Didn't need any of them to validate my existence. I pulled out hotel stationery and a pen, started writing without thinking too hard about the words. Dear 15-year-old me, you're not wrong about any of it. You're not too sensitive. You're not too serious. You're not too quiet or too much or too anything. You're exactly right. You're exactly enough. You don't need Mum to tell you that. You don't need Vanessa to see you. You don't need anyone to say so for it to be true. You are enough. You always were. I'm sorry it took me 20 years to believe it. Love, 35-year-old you. I read it over once, then walked to the window. The hotel had given me a room with a small balcony. I stepped outside into the cool evening air and held the letter over the railing. I'd bought a lighter from the hotel gift shop on my way up. One of those disposable ones. I flicked it on and touched the flame to the corner of the paper. The letter caught quickly, edges curling and blackening, as fire consumed my words. I watched it burn, watched the smoke carry pieces of it away into the night sky. A symbolic release. A letting go of the girl who'd spent her whole life waiting to be enough for people who would never see her. When it was gone, nothing left but ash that drifted down toward the street below. I went back inside and picked up my phone. Daniel answered on the first ring. "Hey, you okay?" And just like that, I wasn't. The composure I'd been maintaining shattered. I sat down hard on the bed and started crying. Not neat, pretty crying. The ugly, gasping kind that comes from somewhere deep and primal. "Michelle, talk to me. I don't know if I'm worth it," I choked out between sobs. All of this, all of the pain and the revelation and the rebuilding. What if I'm not worth all this trouble? "You are." "How do you know?" "Because I chose you. Every day for 10 years I chose you. Not because you're perfect, not because you earned it, but because you're you, and that's enough." "But my own mother couldn't." "Your mother was broken by grief she never processed. That's not a reflection on you. That's a reflection on her." I wiped my face with the back of my hand. "I'm so tired, Daniel. Tired of carrying this. Tired of trying to understand it. Tired of wondering if I'll ever really be free of it." "You have the right to be tired," he said gently. "You have the right to feel every single thing you're feeling. But you also have the right not to give up on yourself. You have the right to choose you, even when they didn't." I lay back on the bed, phone pressed to my ear, and stared at the ceiling. What if I can't forgive her? What if I never can? Then you don't. Forgiveness isn't a requirement for healing. What is accepting that you can't change the past and deciding that the past doesn't get to write your future? I closed my eyes. I want to be free of this. I want to stop caring what they think. I want to stop hoping they'll change. So stop. Choose yourself instead. Is it really that simple? No, it's actually really hard, but it's also really necessary. We talked for another hour about everything and nothing, about the father I'd never really known, the mother I'd never really had, the sister who'd never really been mine, about the life I'd built despite them, the love I'd found without them, the person I'd become when I stopped waiting for their permission. By the time we hung up, something had shifted. Not healed, healing would take longer, but shifted. A fundamental change in how I saw myself and my place in the story I'd been living. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I wasn't the ghost of my mother's dead sister. I wasn't the invisible woman waiting to be seen. I was Michelle Howard, 35 years old, years. Adopted, yes, but not lesser for it. Overlooked, yes, but not diminished by it. Hurt, yes, but not broken beyond repair. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. That night, I chose myself. And that was the bravest thing I'd ever done. And that was the bravest thing I'd ever done. But as I sat with Daniel the next morning in our kitchen, coffee warming my hands, I realised bravery wasn't a one-time choice. It was choosing yourself again and again every day. Daniel had picked me up from the hotel at dawn. Didn't ask questions, just held my hand on the drive home. Now we sat in the quiet morning light and I found myself studying him. Really looking at him. This man who'd stood beside me through all of this without ever asking me to be different than I was. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Always. Why don't you ever talk about money at that party when everyone was Googling you and finding out about the company's sale? You looked uncomfortable, like you wished they didn't know." He was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee, though he'd already added sugar. "Because money doesn't define us. It never has. But people assume." "I know what people assume, that we won because we're wealthy, that your family finally respects you because I have money, that everything worked out because we could afford for it to work out. He looked up at me. That's not why any of this matters. Then why does it matter? Because you finally stopped waiting for people who couldn't see you. That would have been worth it if we were broke. I thought about that, about how my family's perception of me had shifted the moment they learned about Daniel's success, about how Vanessa had only panicked when she lost her CEO position, not when she lost my respect, about how everything seemed to revolve around money and status and visible success. You sold 70% of the company 2 years ago, I said. You've never really told me why, not the full reason. He set down his coffee cup. Because I didn't want to be that person anymore. The person who measures worth by net worth, who spends 80 hours a week building something just to prove I could. I wanted to do work that mattered. The charity work? The technology grants for non-profits? Yeah, but also... He reached across the table and took my hand. I wanted to be present. For us. For life. I watched my mother die 5 years ago and it changed something in me. I remembered that time. Daniel's mother had been diagnosed with late-stage cancer and was gone within 4 months. He'd been devastated in a way I'd never seen him before or since. You never talk about that time, I said gently, because I'm ashamed of it. I fell apart, completely. For 6 months, I could barely function. Stopped going to the office, stopped answering calls, just sat in our apartment in the dark, replaying every conversation I'd had with her, wishing I'd said different things. I remember. You stayed. His voice was thick with emotion. Everyone else, my business partners, my friends, even some family, they tried for a week or two, then gave up, said I needed professional help, which was probably true, but you just stayed, sat with me in the dark, didn't try to fix me or cheer me up, just stayed. I remembered those months. Coming home from work to find him in the same spot on the couch where I'd left him that morning. Making him food he barely touched, holding him while he cried. Not because I knew what to do, but because leaving felt impossible. You saved me, he said. People think I saved you at that party, that I rode in like some knight in expensive clothes and fixed everything. But you saved me first. Years before that, when I was broken and useless and couldn't give you anything back. That's not how I saw it. I know, that's the point. You didn't see me as a project to fix or a burden to carry. You just saw me as someone who needed not to be alone. That's love, real love, the kind that doesn't keep score. I felt tears pricking my eyes again. I didn't save you, I just stayed. That's the same thing. He squeezed my hand. When someone is drowning, staying is saving. When someone is lost, presence is the map home. Your mother would have been proud of you, I said, of what you're doing now, the meaningful work. She would have been proud of us, of what we built together. He paused. That's what I wanted to tell your family at that party, but didn't know how. They think we won because of money, because of status, because I showed up in an expensive suit and made them realize they'd underestimated you. Didn't we? No. We won because we chose each other when we had nothing to prove. I chose you when you were a woman sketching in a coffee shop with no idea I was supposed to be something impressive. You chose me when I was broken and couldn't offer you anything but darkness and grief. We chose each other before success, before money, before any of it mattered to anyone else. I thought about that first coffee shop meeting, how I'd looked up from my drawings to find this man asking if he could sit down, how we'd talked for hours about work that meant something, not work that paid the most, how he'd called the next day and the day after that, and how it had felt like finding someone who spoke my language. They'll never understand that, I said. My family. They'll always think the money is what makes us valuable. Let them think that. We know the truth, which is that the most valuable thing we have can't be deposited in a bank. It's this, you and me, choosing each other every day. That's the real wealth. I stood up and walked around the table to him. He pulled me onto his lap and I buried my face in his neck, breathing him in. This man who'd never asked me to earn his love, who'd never made me compete for his attention, who'd seen me clearly from the beginning and decided that was enough. Thank you, I whispered, for staying too. Always. We sat there in our kitchen as morning light filled the room, two people who'd found each other by accident and chosen each other on purpose. My family would never understand it. They'd never grasp that the victory wasn't in Daniel's net worth, or my professional success, or even in Vanessa's downfall. The victory was in this. Two people who knew what it meant to be seen and chose to see each other every day. Real family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stays when you have nothing left to give. It's who stays when you have nothing left to give. And I was about to find out who in my family understood that and who didn't. My mother called 3 days after the hotel night, her voice small and uncertain. Michelle, can we talk? Please, just you and me. I'd almost said no, almost told her that 35 years of silence couldn't be fixed by one conversation. But Daniel had reminded me that boundaries weren't about punishment. They were about protection. And I couldn't set boundaries if I didn't communicate them. Yes, I'd said, but not at your house, and not at mine. Neutral ground. We met at a cafe neither of us had been to before. She arrived first, looking older than I remembered. Smaller, somehow. She'd aged a decade in the week since Vanessa's party. I sat down across from her without preamble. No hug, no pretense of warmth we didn't feel. Thank you for meeting me, she said. I'm here to listen and to tell you what needs to change. She flinched at my directness. I read your father's letter, the one he left at his grave. Aunt Carol told me you have one too. I do. I failed you. Her voice broke. For your entire life, I failed you. Yes, you did. She probably expected me to soften that to say it was okay, or that I understood. I didn't, because it wasn't okay. And while I understood her grief, I didn't excuse what it had cost me. I don't know how to fix this, she said. You can't fix it. 35 years of damage can't be repaired in one conversation. I kept my voice level. Not cruel, but not gentle either. But you can be honest about what happened, and you can respect what I need going forward. What do you need? I don't need you to love me like you love Vanessa. That ship sailed decades ago. But I deserve respect. I deserve to be treated like a person, not like a ghost you wish would disappear, and I'm giving that to myself now, with or without you. She was crying quietly, tears running down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, Michelle. I'm so sorry for all of it. For not being the mother you deserved. For letting my grief poison everything. For choosing Vanessa over you every single time. I appreciate that, I said, and I meant it. But sorry doesn't undo 35 years. It doesn't give me back the childhood I should have had. It doesn't erase the damage. It's a start. That's all it is. What can I do? You can acknowledge publicly that you treated me unfairly. You can stop making excuses for Vanessa. You can start showing up to my life the way you showed up to hers. And you can accept that I might never fully forgive you, and that's my right. I can do that. Can you? Because it means treating me like I matter, even when no one's watching. It means not calling me only when you need something. It means actually being interested in my life, my work, my marriage. Can you do that? She hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw the truth. She wanted to be able to do it, but wanting and doing were different things. I'll try, she said finally. That's all I'm asking. Try. And if you can't, then we maintain distance. I'm not abandoning you. But I won't accept being treated as less than. Show up differently or don't show up. That sounds like an ultimatum. It's a boundary. There's a difference. We talked for another hour. She told me about Linda, about their childhood together, about the grief that had consumed her when her sister died. I listened, not because it excused anything, but because understanding someone's pain doesn't cost me anything. When we left, she tried to hug me. I let her briefly, but I didn't return it with any enthusiasm. Forgiveness, if it came, would be earned slowly over time, not granted in a single afternoon, because she'd finally said sorry. The following week, I sent an email to extended family members. Not to Vanessa, she'd made her choices clear, but to aunts, uncles, cousins, who'd been at those gatherings, who'd laughed or stayed silent or enabled the dysfunction. The email was simple: I'm establishing boundaries going forward. I'm willing to maintain relationships with family members who treat me with respect and genuine interest. I'm not interested in relationships based on obligation guilt or the pretense that the past didn't happen. If you want to be part of my life, I'm open to that. But it needs to be real. No more performances, no more pretending everything is fine when it isn't. The responses varied. Uncle Ron sent back a defensive message about how I was being dramatic and needed to forgive and forget. I deleted it without responding. Cousin Jennifer sent a thoughtful apology acknowledging that she'd been dismissive and judgmental. She asked if we could get coffee. I said yes. Aunt Patricia sent nothing. Her silence was its own message. Aunt Carol, unsurprisingly, sent love and support. I'm proud of you for protecting yourself, Tyler called. I got a copy of your email from Grandma. She's upset, but she's also... I think she knows you're right. And I wanted to say, I'm committed to being different, to being better. I know you are. My mum won't talk to anyone. She's basically shut down. Stopped leaving the house except for therapy the board required. That's her journey to take? Do you think she'll ever get better? I don't know. And honestly, Tyler, that's not my problem to solve anymore. That's fair. Over the following weeks, the family sorted itself into camps. A few people genuinely tried to change their behaviour. They asked about my work, included Daniel, in conversation stopped acting like my success was somehow threatening. I welcomed them cautiously, watching to see if the change was real or performative. Others drifted away resentful that I wouldn't just let things go back to normal. I let them go without guilt. And some, like my mother, hovered in the uncertain middle, trying sometimes, failing other times, making progress and then backsliding into old patterns. I learned to take each interaction as it came, without expecting transformation. Daniel asked me once if I regretted setting such firm boundaries, if part of me wished I'd just accepted their half-hearted efforts and maintained the facade of family unity. No, I said, because I finally understand something. What? Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending the damage didn't happen or welcoming people back without changed behaviour. It means not letting the past control my future. And is your past controlling your future? Not anymore. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means not letting the past control my future. It means not letting the past control my future. And 3 months later, I was finally living like I believed it. The healing, when it came, arrived in small moments. Not dramatic reconciliations or tearful apologies in front of audiences, just quiet acts that accumulated slowly like snow building on branches until you looked up one day and realised the whole landscape had changed. Tyler showed up at Daniel's charity centre on a Tuesday afternoon. I was there reviewing a grant proposal for a non-profit that provided technology training to underserved communities. I looked up and there he was, 17, now taller than I remembered, wearing jeans and a volunteer t-shirt. Tyler, what are you doing here? Mr. Howard Daniel, He mentioned you guys were always looking for volunteers. I thought..." He shifted his weight, suddenly looking younger. "I thought maybe I could help, if that's okay." "Of course it's okay, but your school..." "This is for school. Community service requirement. But I wanted it to be here. Wanted to learn about what you guys actually do." He volunteered every Tuesday and Thursday after that, helped set up computers, showed elderly people how to use email, taught kids basic coding. He was patient and kind, nothing like the boy who'd pushed me into a pool 6 months ago. One Thursday, he handed me an envelope before leaving. "What's this? Just read it when you have time." Inside was a handwritten letter on my notebook paper. His handwriting was careful, like he'd drafted it multiple times. "Dear Aunt Michelle, I'm writing this in my therapy session. Dr. Chen suggested I write letters to people I've hurt, whether I send them or not, but I want to send this one. I'm sorry for pushing you into the pool. I'm sorry for laughing. I'm sorry for thinking it was funny to humiliate someone who'd never done anything to hurt me. I'm sorry for being the kind of person who learned cruelty from the adults around me and then practiced it on someone who deserved better. I'm in therapy now, learning about generational patterns and how trauma gets passed down. Learning that just because something was normal in my family doesn't mean it was okay. Learning that I have a choice about who I become. I want to be better than my mum, better than my grandmother, better than the person I was at that party. Thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. Thank you for showing me what it looks like to have dignity and boundaries and self-respect. I'm trying to be more like you. Love, Tyler." I read it 3 times, tears blurring the words by the end. Later I texted him, "Thank you for this. I'm proud of who you're becoming." He texted back immediately, "I'm proud of who you've always been." Cousin Jennifer started meeting me for coffee once a month. Real coffee, real conversations. She asked about my design work, about Daniel's charity projects, about our plans for the future. Didn't mention Vanessa, didn't make excuses. Just showed up authentically, which was all I'd asked for. Aunt Carol called weekly, sharing stories about Linda, filling in the gaps of my history. She'd started putting together a collection of photos and letters for me. "Your mother's not ready to do this yet, but you deserve to know where you came from." Uncle Ron never reached out again. Neither did several cousins who'd been at that first family meeting. I felt nothing about their absence. Not anger, not sadness, just acceptance. Some people couldn't or wouldn't change, and that wasn't my problem to solve. My mother was trying in her limited way. She called every few weeks, asked about my work, remembered things I told her. But there was still distance there, still that fundamental inability to connect deeply. I accepted what she could give without expecting more. And Vanessa was silent. For months, nothing. No calls, no messages, no attempts at contact. Tyler said she'd sold her house, moved into an apartment, was working some mid-level consulting job, going to therapy 3 times a week, barely leaving her apartment otherwise. I didn't think about her much, didn't waste energy on anger or hope for reconciliation. She'd made her choices. I'd made mine. We were living separate lives, and that felt right. Then, 4 months after I'd set my boundaries, a package arrived. No return address, but I recognized Vanessa's handwriting on the label. I almost threw it away without opening it. But curiosity won. Inside was a photo album. Old fabric covered, the kind people used before everything went digital. And a note, just 1 sentence. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm sorry." I opened the album carefully. The first page took my breath away. It was my father and me. I couldn't have been more than 4 years old. We were at a park, and he was pushing me on a swing. His face was turned toward me, caught mid-laugh. I was looking back at him with pure joy. The kind of joy only children have before the world teaches them to guard it. I'd never seen this photo, had never known it existed. I turned the page. More pictures. My father teaching me to ride a bike, his hand steady on the seat. My father and me at a science fair, both of us grinning in front of my volcano project. My father reading to me, my head on his shoulder, both of us lost in the story. Page after page of moments I'd forgotten or never knew had been captured. Evidence of love I'd known existed, but had never seen documented. Proof that someone had thought I was worth photographing, worth remembering, worth keeping. The pictures my mother had hidden away. The memories she couldn't bear to look at because I looked too much like Linda, because being a father to me reminded her that her sister wasn't there to be a mother. But Vanessa had found them, had put them together, had sent them to me. It wasn't forgiveness I felt looking through those photos. It was something more complicated. Recognition that Vanessa was trying in the only way she knew how to give back something she'd taken, to acknowledge what I'd lost and what I deserved to have all along. I called Tyler that night. Did you know about the photo album? Mum asked me to help her find pictures. She spent weeks going through boxes in Grandma's attic. Said you deserved to have memories of your dad that weren't filtered through everyone else's grief. Why didn't she just apologise? Why this? She said words felt empty, that she'd said sorry before and it didn't mean anything. She wanted to do something that mattered. I looked down at the album in my lap at my father's face, smiling at me from 20 different moments I'd forgotten. It does matter, I said quietly. Tell her. Tell her thank you. You could tell her yourself. Not yet, maybe not ever, but this matters. After I hung up, I spent hours going through every photo. Daniel sat beside me looking at pictures of a man he'd never met, loving a child I'd once been. He really loved you, Daniel said softly. Yeah, he did. Your sister gave you something precious. She gave me back my father. And that was true. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not a fixed relationship or healed wounds, but she'd given me back proof of love that existed before everything got complicated. Evidence that I'd been seen and valued and cherished by someone who chose me. She gave me back my father. The only gift that mattered. The only gift that mattered. And it gave me the courage to offer something in return, not reconciliation, but possibility. I stood in my dining room the evening before the dinner looking at the table I'd set. 8 chairs, one of them empty except for a framed photograph of my father. The same photo from the album Vanessa had sent him, pushing me on a swing, both of us laughing. Daniel came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist. You're sure about this? I'm sure. It's okay if you change your mind. I won't. This isn't about them anymore. It's about me showing myself that I can extend grace without losing my boundaries, that I can be generous without being a doormat. The next evening they arrived one by one. Aunt Carol first bringing flowers and stories about Linda. Cousin Jennifer with wine and genuine warmth. Tyler taller every time I saw him with a maturity that made me proud. My mother came next looking nervous. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for coming. Then Vanessa. She stood in my doorway looking smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Her hair was different, simpler, like she'd stopped trying so hard. She held a small gift bag. I wasn't sure you'd actually want me here, she said. I wasn't sure either until this morning. If you want me to leave, no, come in. We gathered in the living room first, making awkward small talk. Daniel played host, making everyone comfortable, giving me space to observe. I watched them look around my home, the one they'd never been invited to before. Taking in the art on the walls, the books, the evidence of a life fully lived. Tyler kept glancing at Vanessa, then at me, like he was waiting for something to explode. But nothing did. We were just people in a room, trying to figure out how to be in the same space without old patterns taking over. Dinner is ready, I said finally. They filed into the dining room and stopped when they saw the table. 8 chairs. The 8th one empty with my father's photo. Vanessa stared at the empty chair for a long moment before sitting down next to it. Why did you keep it empty? Everyone went quiet, waiting for my answer. I stood at the head of the table, Daniel on my right. Because Dad was the only one who saw me when I couldn't see myself. That chair reminds me that someone loved me, unconditionally, without conditions or comparisons or terms. I looked around at all of them. And now I do that for myself. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Vanessa nodded slowly, like she was accepting something she'd known but hadn't wanted to admit. This isn't a reconciliation dinner, I continued. And it's not forgiveness, it's just this. Us in a room trying to be better than we've been. Some of you have shown up for that. Some of you are still trying to figure out how. And that's okay. But this is what family looks like to me now. People who choose to be here. People who treat each other with respect. People who don't need blood to make it real. Tyler raised his water glass. To real family. We echoed him. Even my mother, even Vanessa. The dinner itself was surprisingly easy. No one talked about the past directly. We talked about Tyler's college plans, about Aunt Carol's upcoming cruise, about Daniel's newest charity project. Normal things. Family things. But different this time because everyone was trying. After dinner, while Daniel served coffee and dessert, I excused myself, went to my bedroom, stood in front of the mirror the way I had 6 months ago at Vanessa's party. But the woman looking back at me was different now. Stronger, clearer, free. Remember this moment, I whispered to my reflection. Not as a threat this time, not as a promise of revenge, but as a reminder that I'd survived, that I'd taken 35 years of being invisible and transformed it into something solid and real, that I'd found my worth without their permission. I touched the mirror lightly, acknowledging the woman I'd become. When I returned to the dining room, Vanessa was standing by the window alone. I joined her, not touching, just standing in the same space. Thank you for the album, I said. It meant everything. I should have done it years ago, should have done a lot of things differently. Yeah, you should have. She flinched but didn't argue. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Good, because I'm not ready to. Will you ever be? I don't know, maybe not, but this, I gestured at the room, at the people, gathered in my home. This is what I can offer right now. A chance to start again slowly with real boundaries. I'll take it. Later, after everyone had left Daniel, and I stood on our balcony looking out at the city lights, the same balcony where I'd burned that letter to my younger self months ago. How do you feel? He asked, lighter, like I finally put down something I've been carrying forever. Any regrets? I thought about it, about the childhood I didn't have, about the mother who couldn't love me the way I deserved, about the sister who used me and the family who overlooked me, about 35 years of being invisible. Only that I waited so long, I said. But I'm here now, and that's what matters. He kissed the top of my head. You're amazing, you know that. I'm learning to believe it. I looked out at the lights at this city where I'd built a life they knew nothing about for so long, where I'd created success and love and meaning without their validation, where I'd learned that worth doesn't come from being seen by the right people. It comes from seeing yourself clearly. They would tell stories about me now, I realised. The family gatherings I wouldn't attend would still mention my name. They'd talk about the daughter who'd been invisible until she wasn't, the sister who'd walked away and built something they couldn't diminish, the woman who'd chosen herself when no one else would. They'd remember me, not as the forgotten daughter, not as the quiet one, not as the girl standing at the edge of a pool waiting for help that never came. They'd remember me for choosing grace over revenge, for setting boundaries without cruelty, for building a life so full that I didn't need their approval to make it matter. Daniel squeezed my hand. What are you thinking? I smiled. That they'll remember me now for the right reasons. They will. And they would. This time, not because I'd destroyed anyone or proven them wrong or shown up with the right credentials, but because I'd done something far more powerful. This time they'll remember me, not as the forgotten sister, but as the one who set herself free. If Michelle's story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or had to set boundaries with the people who should have protected, you know you're not alone. This story is for everyone who's been the forgotten one, the overlooked daughter, the person who gave everything and received nothing. What would you have done in Michelle's position? Would you have helped Vanessa for 5 years, or walked away sooner? Should Michelle have forgiven her family completely, or were her boundaries exactly right? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I read every single one, and your perspectives shape the stories we tell. If this moved, you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss stories about finding strength, setting boundaries, and choosing yourself. Share this with someone who needs to hear they're enough exactly as they are, that family is about love and choice, not just blood. Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to value yourself. You don't need approval to set boundaries. And you don't need validation to know your worth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself, even when everyone says that's selfish. Michelle learned that real family isn't who shares your blood, it's who stays when you have nothing left to give. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for being part of this community. Until next time, remember your worth and protect your peace.